You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Chris in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, TV shows, games, books, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 459, where tonight, Chris and I are going to break down our discussion and our final review, I guess you would say, of The Mandalorian and Grogu, the latest Star Wars movie that just came out in theaters. It's still playing this weekend, of course. And to my right here is Chris. Chris, welcome to the show. Man, it finally came. I know you and I had a chance to see it twice, and we're going to get a chance to talk about it. All the spoilers now.
Yeah, I'm ready to discuss it. I've been kind of holding stuff in because a lot of my crew has taken their time to see this movie. But now that everyone has seen it, I'm hopeful everyone that joins us here tonight has seen it, because I would hate to spoil it for them. I'm ready to talk about it.
Yeah, no, good point. We're going to roll right into spoilers. You know, we've been doing non-spoiler things, non-spoiler reviews and thoughts, that kind of thing. But because this has already been out for now 3-4 days, it's 4 days technically at this point, we felt it was just more appropriate to go right into it. So we'll get to that point. If you guys want to stick around for all of the pleasantries and news information, you can certainly do that. Otherwise, we're going to spoil the heck out of this movie. So before we get started, Chris, how about some shout outs and thank yous to some very special people?
Yes, we would like to give a shout out to our Patreon members. First, we have a new one with our We Are All the Republic. R2B2, thank you for supporting us through Patreon. Are now part of the tribe members. Krista Martinelli, Will I Am, my girl Paisley, I've Got a Brad Feeling, Rita Reborn, Jacob, Josh, Uncle Leon, Sharkman Dan, Alejandro, Jackson Abbott, Daz Davies, Risk Bayless, Danny P, Mike Borda, Dante, and Kat, who is AKA Vader's girl. And then our Delusions of Grandeur members, my guy now, This Is Rod Racing, Rod Gumstead, Steve, and my girl Vanessa. Thank you all for your support.
No, thank you guys. Again, this show wouldn't be possible without your financial support, just to keep everything up and running. If you're interested in Patreon, we do exclusive Patreon episodes pretty much every week. The movie's kind of throwing a wrench in that schedule, but there's like we at least do 2 shows a week. One of those is Patreon, exclusively per Patreon, and you guys can check that out you can scan the QR code that's on the screen there, or you can head out to cantinacast.com/Patreon or patreon.com/thecantinacast. Either way, we'll get you there. You can sign up for as little as $2 and all the way up to $20, just depending on what you want to do. So that's the plug. We'll move on from there. All right. Let's see. Before we do anything else, just a reminder that we do have a show coming up on this Sunday. That'll be a Patreon exclusive. And then we'll try to get another one in this week as well. We may have to switch that up, but just check the schedule and check Patreon for the latest updates on that. But from here on out, we are going to be doing a lot of episodes that are kind of centric, of course, around The Mandalorian and Grogu, some breakout episodes, some character spotlights, and we'll talk about some of the themes, that sort of thing. So still hashing out exactly what we want to talk about. A lot of that will be predicated on this discussion here, and certainly what we think about, as this movie sits with us for a few more days here, how that'll roll out. And then the other thing I want to just quickly mention is that this is now the second episode where we're going to give away a free Mandalorian and Grogu poster. These are the official posters that were released and to the public. Yeah, he's got it right there. Oh, I didn't even see that. I thought you were raising your hand for a question there.
No.
But yeah, Chris has got one hanging up back here. I have one that I'll reach over and grab in just a second. But Chris, why don't you give them the details on how they can enter to win a poster? We'll give one away tonight, but it's too late to enter for tonight. But the next show, you guys can certainly enter in that. But Chris, give them the details on how they get that.
Absolutely. Just send us your question about The Mandalorian and Grogu. You can either DM the Cantina Cast at their social media accounts, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, on Patreon. You can send a DM on Patreon with your question, or you can email myself on Instagram. I do have a TikTok account, but I check Instagram messages more often. So my handle there is .chris.atx, and it's right there in my little signature here. Or you can email us at hello@cantinacast.com.
Yeah, however you'd like to get it. All that matters is you get a question over to us. We'll ask it on the air. We have a lot of questions to get through tonight, but we've already picked the winner for tonight, and we'll announce that at the very end. So we'll do our full breakthrough, or I guess a review and discussion. We'll get into the Patreon or the questions at the very end, and we'll announce the winner and close out the show. So that's how it's all going to run. I guess from here on out, we're going to get into spoilers. So we've been talking about how we wanted to kind of have a new review system. Reviews are not something we have typically done here on this show. And I really have been trying to lean into it. But at the same time, I didn't want it to just be a flat, 7 out of 10 without any additional context or any way to contextualize that, right? And so what we've decided to do is we came up with 5 categories that we're going to use to kind of grade this movie and then movies going forward. I'm not really sure if we'll apply the same kind of grading scale to like comics and television shows and that sort of thing. So stick around as this continues to evolve. But the categories that we're going to talk about, starting with the narrative, I want to talk about narrative as meaning the plot, the characters, the settings, the themes. After we get into that, we'll talk a little bit about the direction. So the direction from the director, pacing. We'll throw in cinematography as it's appropriate for the direction of the movie, but like the sequencing, the artistic style that they might have, how shots are framed, right? All the artsy stuff that goes into movies will be all under the direction heading. I want to talk about music because I think music is a vital component to all Star Wars movies. And so we'll grade that based on the composition, the use of the music at certain moments in time of the movie itself. Then we'll talk about effects. And effects is kind of a catch-all. I may break this out later down the road, but right now it really is about all the special effects, all the practical effects, the puppeteer work. I'm going to lump in sound effects as well. There's a whole history of amazing sound effects that come from Ben Burtt all the way back from Ben Burtt and have just moved on through the years that it is kind of its own category and something very special, I think, in Star Wars. But for now, We'll lump that under effects. And then the last thing, or 2 more things, is the experience. And so when we talk about the experience, this is kind of like the setting in which we saw it or the people that we might have been with, the fun factor that went into it. That'll be a rating of itself. And then overall, at the very end, we'll give a final score about what we think about the movie. And that final score is not an average. It's not, it's kind of whatever we want to be the final score for this. It should align. I don't think you're going to see a big disparity in terms of like all the individual ratings and this final score. But it is kind of our own assessment of the movie. And Chris and I we don't talk about anything, we don't try to negotiate on, what's going to be higher or lower. In fact, I didn't message him until tonight and said, hey, dude, what's your score? I have no idea of where his individual numbers are. So we'll get into all that here in just a second. But how about this? Just really quickly, maybe just how did you enjoy the movie, high level, before we get into the details? Not a lot of time here, but maybe like 30, 60 seconds on it.
So I loved it. Absolutely. I had a great time watching it. My theater was a little subdued. I did see it at 10:15 in the evening, and I was at a Regal, and God bless them. They played 40 minutes of trailers and commercials at the start time. So
oh my goodness,
that started to get annoyed. We started to hear like people in the crowd be like, ugh. So that kind of killed that experience for me. But overall, the movie, I loved it. I enjoyed it. Was it perfect? No. But was it what I think it needed to be? It was. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. And I saw it again. Same thing. I actually enjoyed it a little bit more because I wasn't trying to pick out like the Easter eggs and like trying to critique it in my head, like watching it for the first time. I was just able to sit back and enjoy it, and I loved it even more. So I think it was perfect. It was perfect for what we need right now, and I think it bodes well for the future of Star Wars and in the movies.
Yes, this was a good movie. Like I really enjoyed it as a Star Wars movie. I had the best time in both of my viewings. The first time I went was like at a 7 o'clock. I thought it was 7:30. It turned out to be 7 p.m. that I saw it on Thursday night. And that crowd was crazy. Like it was full. The crowd was completely full. The theater was completely packed. Everybody there got all the inside jokes, which was good because that meant I could tell when Road to the Hutt's face came up, everybody laughed. There were other moments, and we'll get to them as we're kind of talking through the different parts of the movie that, unless you were kind of an insider or someone that had some knowledge of some of the past history of Star Wars, I don't think these jokes would have landed the way they did. And I could hear the audience laughing. And so that experience was great. Like it added to the overall experience of just watching the movie. Anytime you have a crowd that's really into it and enthusiastic and gets the content and understands the wink winks and the nudge nudges that the writers and directors are throwing your way. The second viewing that I had was a little bit more subdued, much like you. The theater was not as crowded. Although I say that, and it felt like people were coming in late, but nonetheless, it wasn't as crowded as the first one. Definitely did not get in on all the jokes and everything, but there were a lot more kids in that one. And I can tell you that that's all they were talking about on the way out. And they were making noises like Grogu, and someone was doing the force thing, and just all the way down the hallway and all the way out. So as we talk more about this movie in upcoming episodes, I do want to talk about the legacy and the impact that this movie and the show are going to have on the younger generation, or those that are just coming into Star Wars, because I think it is significant. And I think it's currently being overlooked, much like we did with the sequel trilogy. That will play out in time, over time. So those are kind of our initial thoughts. I had a great time. I really loved the movie. It was a lot of fun. When did fun become a bad word, Chris? Like, I don't understand how there's so many people out there, especially with Star Wars, going, "Oh, it's fun. That's a terrible word." That's, it's your focus determines your reality. That's right. That's what I think of when I hear that. But I'm so tired. I'm fed up with all these people knocking the word fun, because God forbid we go to a movie to have fun. Like, what the hell are you going to the movies for?
Exactly. I think some fans, and I want to say this, when I say some, I mean a small minority. I definitely do not mean the Star Wars fandom as a whole, because I'm friends with a lot of Star Wars fans. I mean, that's what I am. I'm a hardcore Star Wars fan. So of course, the majority of my friend group, they're going to be Star Wars fans as well. Everyone loved it. I think the problem is there are just a small minority of fans who go into a Star Wars movie expecting it to be earth-shattering, expecting it to be something that they have never experienced before watching a Star Wars movie. And that's just not going to happen. So if you have those expectations, of course you're going to go in and you're not going to have a good time. Also, if you really feed into a lot of, and the only word I could use is hate around this movie, you really feed into that, that's going to, kind of make you jaded going into seeing this movie, and you're just not going to enjoy yourself as if you went in with an open mind and just say, "Hey, I hope this movie is good. I hope this movie entertains me. If that's what it does, then it's a success." And that's what it did for me. So I think it's the expectation of a small group of fans, and unfortunately, a lot of them have really loud platforms, so they're able to get that across, and that's what we see. But I can definitely say that the majority of the fans that I've talked to, actually mostly all of them, have really enjoyed this movie. So really don't give that small subset of fans who will never be happy again, I believe, with anything with Star Wars. Don't give them too much. I mean, I always say listen. It's always good to listen, but don't put too much into what they say. Go with what your heart says. Go with what you love, and I guarantee you're going to have a great time. So yeah, that's where I think it comes from.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Co-sign all of that, and maybe we'll talk more about that as we move on here. So don't forget, if you're with us on the live recording, feel free to throw questions in the chat. If you just want to answer them or comment, you're absolutely more than welcome to do that. We already got a number of people here in the chat, and Chris is going to be keeping tabs of everybody. We'll give you guys some shout outs here at the very end. So, okay, let's do it. We're running late already as it was. So let's get into our breakdown of this. And why don't we start with the narrative? So with narrative, like we said, we want to talk about plot. We want to talk about characters, the settings, and the themes. So I'll kind of kick us off here and talk about each one of those. I've got a lot here, so I may break over to you here in just 1 second, but narratively, first off, this was a very familiar movie and story for a lot of people, right? If you watch the television series, it was very, very accessible. That said, the way they set this up, even if you hadn't watched the series, you might have had a couple of questions about who was who and that kind of thing. They probably may or may not have gotten resolved, but they didn't matter in the grand scheme of the story, which is a good thing. And my guess is you were able to follow along with this Star Wars movie. I don't know very many people that didn't watch the television series or weren't already familiar with Mando and Grogu. I don't know very many people that were thinking, I haven't watched Star Wars in, like 8 years, and I don't know nothing about this Mandalorian thing, but I like the trailers, or I like the, the ads or whatever it was. I'm not saying they're not out there. All I'm saying is I don't know very many of those. And so I would say that this was a very accessible, it felt like very close to the TV series at times. And this will come up a little bit more, I guess, in the critiques of things at times. And I said this on social media, it walked a very fine line of treading into what felt like a television series. And then right when I felt like it was getting too deep, it would kind of pull out. There was only one moment where I felt like it did kind of cross that line. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But overall, it felt like a movie. It was a cinematic experience for me. And especially having the IMAX factor into it, which we can talk about when we get to the effects part of it, that really, certainly blew up the movie for me in some really good ways. So it came very close in terms of that. As far as the characters go, I mean, it's so refreshing. And I know we said this when we broke down the 25-minute preview. It was so refreshing to see them on screen again, right?
Right.
It was lovely that they were on the big screen, but just getting Mando and Grogu, and especially Mando, because he really kind of run the first half of this movie is really focused on him. Maybe 3/4 of the movie is rightfully so focused on him. But it was great to see that lone wolf and cub story that we fell in love with during, seasons 1, 2, and 3. The father and son dynamic, the clan of two dynamic, the Mandalorian and the Jedi coming together, working together. You've got somebody who is part of the most abundant species in the galaxy in the Mandalorian, and you got the juxtaposition of Grogu being the most rarest of species in the galaxy, and those two coming together. It was everything that I loved about those two on screen. The duality of them, how they work together, seeing them progress and working together as a team, and then independently for the first time in a big way that we had never seen before. It was really, really great to see them. I love these two characters. I hope we continue to get more stories for them, whether that's a season 4 or a sequel movie, or they show up in other series or show up in other movies. It's really great to think that we've got at least Grogu now for a number of years. God forbid something happened to him, or the Force forbid something happened to him. But at least Grogu will be around for a very long time. We'll see how long the Mandalorian is. He lives a very dangerous life. So we'll have to see about that. But before I go too further with the characters, how about you as far as the plots and characters there? What was, what did you like and maybe not like about those?
So first of all, I agree with you. It felt like a cinematic experience. And obviously that was the main concern that a lot of us had is it just going to be a TV show ported to the big screen, or is it going to actually feel like a actual movie? And it was created to be a movie. For me, it fit that bill perfectly. It was a movie. I know you said that it seemed like there were certain areas where it kind of started to dip, where you started to feel like it could have been a TV show. I didn't really sense that. I thought that the whole entire film felt like it was made for the big screen. So that concern I was able to toss out the window. In regards to plot, the plot is very basic. It's very hero's journey on two fronts, maybe one and a half, I guess you could say, not really two, but it's definitely one. And it kind of followed those same beats. So it wasn't too complex of a plot, which is fine. Again, that's one of the detractions that some small group of fans have, that the plot wasn't complex. It didn't need to be complex, not for a story like this, not for a movie like this. So I thought the plot itself, it was a basic plot, but it fit what it tried to do. As far as characters, the characters I thought that needed to be developed actually did have some development. That's one of the things that I kind of was a little disappointed with, was that we didn't get like big scenes or big parts of dialogue or actions between characters that kind of moved them tremendously. But did they move forward? I believe they did. And I was actually, after I watched it the second time, I was like, you know what? Some of the things that I thought would happen as far as character development actually did happen. And I didn't even notice it the first time I saw it because I was just too focused on everything else. But the second time I saw it, I was like, you know what? It fit that bill. Now, could it have been a little bit more? I thought so, but that's fine. As long as there was some character development, I was going to be happy, and there was. So from that aspect, and then how everything was put together, that was one of the big issues that I had with some recent Star Wars projects. The Acolyte, is the one that comes to mind right now, is that the storytelling was real choppy in that. And although I enjoyed it, and I am disappointed that, it was canceled after one season, that was my biggest detraction of that series, was that the storytelling was always very choppy. With this, it wasn't really like that, because there wasn't a complex story to chop up. It was just straight on from point A to point B. So from that aspect, I thought they did a real good job. So overall, in that area, I was pleased. Were some parts, a little disappointing? Yes, but it wasn't a lot. It wasn't enough for me to just, throw a shadow over that whole category.
Yeah, there weren't any big swings that Favreau took with the directing. There weren't any big swings that were taken with the writing. There weren't any big swings taken with the character development, maybe outside of Grogu, but I think we were kind of expecting that. I would say this too: the feedback that we've heard from folks saying it felt like it was a television series. A lot of that, and I hate to keep going back to it, but it's your focus and your reality, right? Mm-hmm. If you go in with those expectations and they're not met, how you deal with that is a you problem. And what we're seeing is a lot of people that went in with the expectations that this was going to be a grand movie that just like of the Skywalker trilogy, or some feel like they're owed that. Like I'm a Star Wars fan. I got that from George Lucas, and therefore you're putting Star Wars label on there. And so I should expect that as well. I'm expecting that from this group as well. I think those are kind of crazy expectations, if you ask me, right? They're unrealistic expectations. I mean, and this is coming from someone who was alive during the prequel, the original trilogy, yeah, the prequel trilogy, and the sequel trilogy.
Yep.
I mean, well, of course I was for sequel trilogy, but you know what I'm saying? Like even when the prequel trilogy came out, those expectations were thrown against Lucas himself, right? And when they weren't met, they came out with pitchforks and torches and ready just to burn Lucasfilm down to the ground. So I think that's what we're seeing here. I think people are going in with this. Now, I will say, was I disappointed that we didn't get that? Yes. Did it completely ruin my experience? Absolutely not. Did it impact the movie in any way for me? No, I love the movie. In fact, I've already seen it twice. I have two more scheduled viewings of it, and I'll probably see it a fifth time. I don't know, because I really did enjoy it. It's Star Wars on the big screen, right? And I think that just really kind of just says a lot in terms of like where we are with some of the fandoms and some of the expectations when they don't get met, when your headcanon is not fulfilled. Some folks tend to just, fire and brimstone and everything's horrible and blame everybody for it, right? That just seems to happen all the time. Just continuing on with some of the other characters. So not many cameos, believe it or not. I think I was surprised, and not in a negative way. This is not a critique by any means, but like the number of cameos, or the fact that we didn't get as many that would have been on the nose. I was surprised about. We didn't get any Pelimato. We didn't get Grief Karga, IG-11, even though we were on Navarro. We didn't get any of, Bo-Katan or any of the Mandalorians that were there. No Armorer. And that's fine. Like, not a critique. I was just a little surprised. I felt like that would be an easy way to, again, spark up some, hey, remember these guys? Or, we've sat with them for the better part of 2-3 seasons, that they've actually had some character development. So it'd be kind of cool to see them play an integral role in some of this, even if it's just a cameo for them to come on screen and say hello or whatever it is. I was surprised that we didn't get any of that. I want to get into Road to the Hutt, though, because he has been what I think a standout character for a lot of people. The only critique that I would have with Rada is I really wish we would have gotten more from him. It felt like when he was on screen, most of what he did, 90% of what he did, is give us the great background on how he's not his father. He's living the shadow of Jabba the Hutt, and I'm not like that guy. It just felt like in both scenes where he had it, he was repeating himself, and that was great. Like, I get it. Like, I totally understand that, but I wanted more from him. I wanted to know more about him and get to see that side of him. Maybe they're saving that. Maybe they're tabling that. They've teased us with this Rada the Hutt, and now the fact that he's joined the New Republic in some capacity, which we have a question at the very end here we'll get to from one of our viewers. But the fact that they've done all that, maybe that's why they didn't explore it. I get he played a small role. He was kind of MacGuffin. He was a MacGuffin there for a little bit, part of the movie, especially at the beginning. And it made sense for him to kind of move on and allow Grogu and the Mandalorian to kind of stand on their own, and then separately the way they did. So narratively, I get it. I think I was just left wanting to know more about Rada the Hutt, especially, given what he did tell us. But what did you think about him too? What did you think about Rada?
So I really enjoyed his character. The one little nitpick that, and this is just me being an original trilogy guy. The one little nitpick I had was that I thought he spoke too much basic. I was hoping that he would do like how the twins were speaking, where they were kind of like doing Huttese basic, back and forth and stuff. But really, he had 2 lines in Huttese and everything else was basic, AKA English. And so I was really hoping that he would have that type of dialect. But other than that, I thought he was great. Now, to your point about how you wanted to see more, I do have a theory on that. And this goes into some of my character growth expectations. Okay. So we can talk about that later on in the show. But I think that they are saving him. And there is a reason. And that this is just my theory, but we'll talk about that later. But I thought overall he was in there. I thought he was effective when he was on screen. The only it's a little Nerf pebble nitpick is that I wish he spoke more Huttese, because that, again, that's just what I expect to hear from the Hutts, after watching like Return of the Jedi a million times. That's what I was expecting. But, again, it's just a little nitpick.
Yeah. And I think when we talked about him and whether or not he would speak, Huttese versus common, basic, I mentioned that in Legends, there have been Hutts that have spoken common and they don't have an accent whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
There are some in Legends that don't even speak Huttese. Okay. On top of that, the way some of that was explained was that they didn't grow up on Hutta or Now Hutta or any of the planets around there. They didn't grow up around other Hutts. And so they don't have an accent and they don't speak anything but basic. And we don't know enough about Rod of the Hutt. We know he was saved, of course, during the Clone Wars, and where he went after that. We have no idea where he was brought up. And it felt like he spoke Huttese well enough. So he must have picked it up somewhere. It's not something they would naturally learn. So maybe he, I don't know, during the summers, he went over and hung out with, his aunt and uncle, the twins or something weird like that.
Wow.
And that's where he picked it up. But so it didn't bother me. And I get it. I totally understand. People are like, hey, they should only speak that. I like the way they did the subtitles first, just to kind of say, look, they're Huttese, establish them as Hutts. This is what you're familiar with. This is what you're familiar hearing whenever Hutts speak. And then they kind of graduate or move off into them speaking basic. And where it really worked was with the little kids, because they have to read all that, right? And then suddenly when they go to English, they're immediately plugged in,
right,
to the scene way more than adults are. And so some of that may or may not be the case. I don't know, but I can tell you it does work. As far as Rod of the Hutt 2, the other thing, and we're going to talk about themes in just a second because I do have some, but I have to bring it up now. The big theme here was all about legacy, right?
Right.
And legacy thematically is something that Star Wars has played around with since, honestly, The Empire Strikes Back.
Exactly.
When we get the announcement that Vader is his father, suddenly Luke is living in this long and very dark shadow of Darth Vader / Anakin Skywalker. When you fast forward that, when we get to something like Bloodlines by Claudia Gray, and you have Leia now contending with everybody knowing and finding out that she was the daughter of Vader, and now she's sitting in, she's a government official. What impact that has on her life and how she's looked upon, right? And having that legacy and having to say, I'm not like that guy at all. It's just thematically, it's something that happens quite a bit. I was thinking about Boba Fett as well, where he stands in this. He's got his father, Jango Fett, and he's kind of been living up to that legacy and he's very proud of it. But then you see him kind of make a turn here, at least maybe a little bit during the book of Boba Fett, right? So I love that growth for them, but it did remind me of those two. The one thing I was thinking about too is like, wow, you got somebody like Kylo Ren, and I don't want to go off topic too much here, but you got somebody like Kylo Ren who is not trying to get away from his legacy, but he's actually trying to endorse the legacy, right? For a while there, and he's the absolute opposite. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So legacy. I bring up Kylo Ren because legacy, whether it's pushing up against or trying to lean into it, is something that we have seen a lot of, and I thought it's a very interesting take with Jabba the Hutt and Grogu the Hutt, and very similar to like the question that we're going to ask here. What role does he play in the New Republic? And I said he probably could go to the New Republic because
you did.
This wouldn't be the first time that we've had a Hutt that worked for the Republic. So I know it's probably been thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years at this point if you want to bring in Legends, but at least we got another one working for the Republic going forward.
And then that also floats into my theory. I get
just hold it. We'll come back to it.
We'll hold it. Yeah.
Okay. What about Zeb? Because Zeb is a massive Star Wars fan, of course, a fan of Star Wars Rebels. One of my cats' name is Zeb. I love that character so much, every aspect of them. And the fact that he was on here on screen was great because we were teased about it in The Mandalorian season 3. I thought they did a great job with the CG. He had more of a supporting role. He wasn't forefront and, in upstaging anybody or anything like that, which is great. I felt like they gave him a moment to kind of show just how great of a combat fighter he is. And he had a lot of comedic quirks at times. But the only thing I would say, again, not necessarily negative, but it was probably because of CGI and they kind of had him in the close quarters of that one hallway where he was fighting. You didn't really get to see a lot of him and in full action of what he is able to do. You get way more, of course, in Star Wars Rebels, but nonetheless, he was a great character. I love that they brought him in. I love that more people now know who this, or I've seen this character. They only said his name once at the very end, or no, it's at the beginning where he tells Zeb, "Hey, I've got one on the run." When Rada has got into the craft or whatever, and they're chasing him,
and then Colonel Colonel Ward says it at the end. He goes, "Hey, Zeb, go pick up the trash."
That's right. Yeah. So we did get, good call. So we did get it twice. Okay.
Right.
Good. So people should know who Zeb is, at least, maybe not at this point, but nonetheless, it was great to have him in the movie. I thought he did a great job and he added just enough to the movie.
Yeah. No, I thought he was a great side character. Again, what was good about him was that, you didn't really need to know all of the backstory of, what we saw in Rebels. If you came into this blind to Star Wars Rebels or any other, even that season 3 of The Mandalorian, you understood what he was there for. He was an extraction person. He made a comment about, I'm getting tired of doing all these hot extractions for you,
Mm-hmm.
So he was like the escape guy. You got that information in the movie itself. So I thought that while it would have been nice to know where he really came from, I thought that they did a good job giving enough information to the audience in this movie. So that way you're not asking, well, who is this guy? So I thought that was a good call for him, and I thought they did Zeb really well in this movie.
Yep. Okay, just a couple more characters here, and certainly if you have other characters you want to talk about, feel free to let's talk about them. But let's talk about Embo and Marok.
Mm-hmm.
They were characters that I'm going to guess a lot of people didn't know about. This was going to be their first time ever seeing these characters. Unless you watch the Clone Wars, and he did show up a number of times in the Clone Wars, so I think it makes sense he probably could have had some semblance of who he was. But seeing him the way he was portrayed, very adept, very ninja-like, certainly could hold his own against somebody like the Mandalorian, I felt was appropriate. Like, I saw folks that were upset because Mando had a hard time taking him down, and the fact that Embo lived. I'm like, I guess you didn't watch the Clone Wars. Like, he was able to go toe to toe with just about everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
They had a plethora of bounty hunters that they could have picked from, which goes to a question that we have a little bit later as well. But I thought he did really well. I really liked him. He was very menacing. There were moments in there where you just felt like this guy was a notch above the typical fanfare person that Mando ran into, whether it was during the television series or any number of one of the scrubs that he's fought in this series. They did make him as a standout kind of a character and somebody that could go toe to toe with him. But what do you think about his portrayal here? And do you feel like it was, any different than what we got in the Clone Wars?
So no, I thought that they portrayed him pretty well here. By the way, I think his animal is named something else, because didn't Marok get killed?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there for this discussion. But I thought he has another animal and it has a different name. But I'm sure that's something we can look up here in a moment. But overall, no, I thought they did him well. And just, I did hear a smirk about that, about how, we shouldn't have a bounty hunter that is more adept than Din Djarin. I'm like, there's always someone.
There's always
better.
A bigger fish.
There's always a bigger fish. There's always someone better. And overall, Mando did best him, but at that one moment, Embo was able to get the best of him. And to be fair, Mando did get distracted because he was hearing the little Anzellan screaming when the dog thing was like trying to get him, and that distracted him. And that's when he stepped on the trap, right? So I didn't have an issue with Embo. I thought he was in there just enough to be the thorn in the side of the Mandalorian that he needed to be. And then when he served his purpose, they let him exit gracefully, just like he would always escape in the Clone Wars. So, I didn't have an issue with his character at all. I thought they did him well.
Yeah, and I think he made the right decision. He looked around like, yeah, whatever, guy. You guys, you want me to go up against this thing, Snake? Nope, we're out of here. Bye. See you later. Live to fight another day is exactly where he was going. So,
he was already paid, so he was out.
Yeah. What about the twins? I want to get to Colonel Ward as well, but the twins, any thought? What did you think of their portrayal, especially coming off of, season, or the Book of Boba Fett, I should say?
So I thought they are one of the areas of where I saw the character development. Now, ultimately, they met their demise, right? But because in the Book of Boba Fett, they were to me, they were kind of docile. They quickly, came up and, when Boba Fett wasn't going to yield to them, they're like, well, we don't want any violence. We don't want any issues with the Pike Syndicate. So we're just going to give it to you. Here you go. Bye. And I thought, wow, they were very, very docile and very not confrontational. In this movie, they are monsters. Just like Din Djarin said, they are monsters. They are bad. It was a whole new side to those two, and I thought it was perfectly played. So they're one of the ones where they had some development from what we saw in the Book of Boba Fett, and I was actually pretty pleased with their character arc. It was, not knowing anything about the movie, I was like, oh man, maybe, I thought there was something sinister, but the way that they were able to emote and the dialogue when they first meet the Mandalorian, they're like, we really want him back, yada, yada, yada. When in return, they wanted him back to kill him. I thought that was really well played there. And then from that point on, we knew that, especially after Coin said, we're going to put him in the Jar match and whatnot, Rhoda, that is, I knew they were down for something. And after that, they were just diabolical. And I thought that was good. Yeah. That was a good character development for them.
Yeah, I mean, gross is how I would categorize those two. Gross is how I would categorize all of the Hutts.
It was pretty nasty. I mentioned real quick. I mentioned in the 25-minute preview show that we did that it reminded me of Caligula. That whole scene when he was walking down the hallway, I was like, ugh. Yeah, what are they doing?
I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. They exactly. I mean, save Rhoda the Hutt, which it feels like he uses deodorant. At least I would expect him to, right? I don't know. I have to look closer when he throws his arms up. Jason Mose in the chat says, one of you guys said that the Hutt building was laid out like a weird and slightly creepy ant farm. You were correct. Yeah, that's what we said when we did the 25-minute breakdown, especially the way they're kind of slithering and kind of laying on top of each other and all that. So the twins themselves, I think were effective villains. I had a lot of questions going into this movie about who was the real villain, because I felt like the twins really couldn't have been it. Like I felt like there was something more. And that's before I got into this kind of acceptance of, okay, we're not going to get a really deep, lore rich kind of a story here, right? It's just going to be a kind of a standalone story, no end credits or anything, like nothing teasing the bigger world. Once I got past all that, then it makes absolute sense that these guys would be kind of the final boss, especially in the way the story kind of changes, right? That we kind of take a 180 in terms of them being, looking for we find out what the real reasons as to why they want Rod of the Hutt. So from that perspective, I would say, yes, they were effective. They were creepy. Definitely agree with you. I didn't pick up on that, but you're right. Like that, it's almost a different side of them. And I do wonder if that's more around tactics and strategy, right? Being situational in those types of moments. They didn't have to be so aggressive with Tatooine, especially given that it's just a crap planet. Right. And, they didn't really want it. But now that all that happened, maybe they've got, maybe they were like, okay, it doesn't matter if Boba Fett becomes the heir to that, because at the end of it all, Rod of the Hutt is truly the one that's going to, is heir to the throne, if you will. And so because Rod is out there, maybe they decided to just go a different path and say, okay, we'll deal with him. And then once we've dealt with him, then we'll come back and deal with Boba. I don't know. But yeah, definitely felt like they were a little bit different there. And I would say I'd chalk that up to more strategy than anything else.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it works. What about Colonel Ward? Sigourney Weaver, queen of sci-fi. She's been in a lot of stuff before. I saw people say that she mailed it in. I wouldn't say she mailed it in. No, I don't know that her character had a lot. I don't know if she had a lot to do with the character in terms of the way it was written. She just wasn't there for a lot of it. She was just kind of being that person that dispatched, gave the information, gave you some, exposition on what's going on, filled you on the background. She was a nice way to segue into how he gets the new Razor Crest, right? She felt very much toolish in that regard, and that's not a bad word. I don't mean it in any kind of derogatory term or bad term, but she was effective in that role. I think I loved the fact that we got to see her fly and be kind of lead Blue Squadron in as Blue leader during that whole combat sequence. That was great, especially given that we know that she came up during the rebellion and she potentially was friends with Leia and Holdo and all those other great characters during the rebellion. But otherwise, I would say was just kind of there. She didn't really have a lot to do, and that's not necessarily a fault or a slight on Sigourney Weaver in any way. So I think it's great that they've kind of put her in Star Wars, and now we have the potential for her to show up in other things. I think based on what I've seen from the different interviews that she's done, she had a really great time. Loved the fact that she's now part of Star Wars, and so I can see her coming back, returning as a character later down the road.
No, I agree. That was one of the disappointments I had. It was when she had the screen time, she was effective. She, was able to accomplish what that character needed to accomplish. And I didn't think Sigourney Weaver mailed it in by any means. I just thought she would have more to do in this movie. I thought her role would be a little bit bigger. I knew she was going to be a supporting character, but I thought it would be on the level of what Zeb did in this movie. And I don't think she reached that by any means. Although the scenes that she was in, the screen time that she did have, I thought she was effective. Essentially, yeah, she was the one in charge, and she divvied out the orders, dispatch, like you said, and I think that was effectively done. That was one of the little disappointments I had. They built up this character like she was going to have something major in this movie with the teasers and then the commercials and whatnot. And she turned out just to have a small supporting role. That was a little disappointing for me. But again, what Sigourney Weaver did, she did well. She did what she needed to do. She did not phone it in. I just wish we got more of it.
Yeah, and I think maybe we will. Maybe that be the compromise there, is that they got her, that she's got the foot in the door, and now we'll get to see more of her.
And I think based on a couple comments that were made, I think we will.
Yeah. Jason says, I agree that we should have got more from her. Acting in the cockpit lacked urgency, which I pin more on the directing. Like I didn't believe she was in battle. I can say that. Yeah, there wasn't a lot. I would say urgency, but there wasn't maybe enough emotion, I guess, or risk. Maybe she's just that confident. I don't know. Maybe that's why she didn't show anything. So Dale says Sigourney's only 76 years young. She would have been fighting in the ring. Yeah, I can see her.
Absolutely.
So, that's what we expect from Sigourney Weaver, right? So maybe that's what we expect from Colonel Ward. Okay, the last character, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but Martin Scorsese, as oh God, what was his name now? I forgot his name.
Hugo
Durant. Yes, Hugo.
Not Kevin
Durant. Really?
Yeah, it's Durant.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah. Cool. But yeah, I mean, he was funny. Like, he did really good. I like the way they used the CG and timed it with his expressions and stuff. And it was really neat to see them use their forearms. And we'd seen them use all four of them, of course, during Solo. But just see them, the way he was using all his arms for different things. And then he was using them to convey expression and things in ways that we would do with only two. But he could do two expressions at the same time with his hands. So I thought it was fine. He was exactly what I thought he was going to be. He's just that person that was kind of another informant, and we'd check in with him every once. So I was surprised we only checked in with him twice. I thought maybe he would be a third time that would give him some information, but nonetheless, small role. But Scorsese in anything is just a kind of a cherry on top, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I thought his role was perfectly done. He didn't need to be in it any more than he was. I want to say that the CG around that character was actually pretty good. I mean,
yeah, it was good.
I saw it with my older son. He was like, "Hey, Dad, was that a puppet?" I'm like, "No, that's CG," because he was thinking that
unless it is puppetry, because they've done that before. Like, Skeleton Crew, there were some things that I was like, "Oh, that's totally CG," and then you watch the behind the scenes.
It's
like,
a puppet.
Crap, that was a puppet. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll get an answer to that, but
yeah,
it looks CG to me. He thought that maybe it was just the actual body and head were a puppet, and like the limbs were CG. I was like, no, that's all CG. It looked really good. And what this was, and I'm glad. And Martin Scorsese's voice work was perfect. He came across as the timid, restaurant keeper, shopkeeper, whatever you want to call it. And he came across perfectly. And what this was, in my opinion, this was an apology for the comment that he made in like 2019, where he said sci-fi type movies and comic book movies are not real cinema. And he took a lot of heat for that. I think this is his apology to fans of those genres, to say, you know what, I was wrong. If it makes it to the screen, it's cinema. And I thought he did a real good job. The one thing I do want to say is that for some reason, I thought that flat meat fry thing, whatever it was. It looked really good, even though that was totally CG. It looked really good. Then I come to learn that Favreau and like a world-renowned chef had a short on StarWars.com and Star Wars social media accounts where they actually made that, and the meat was actually Spam. So I was like, I need to watch that. But that sandwich looked really good. It actually made me hungry. I was like, that sandwich looks good. But no, back to Scorsese. I thought that was a great character. I thought it was executed perfectly.
Yeah, as the longer you're on the show, the more I realize we have some major differences, because I don't know that I would have eaten that thing, quite honestly. Like I looked at it, I was like, that's disgusting. It's gray, number one. And then, it just didn't look sanitary. Right, but whatever. I'd like to think Scorsese came out there and did that too as an apology, but I don't know, man. I've seen other interviews. Maybe he's changed in his older age. I don't think he'd give a crap. I think it was more about, hey, I'm friends with Favreau and George Lucas is my buddy, and this may be the only time I get a chance to do him a solid and live in his legacy kind of thing. And so he did the movie, but it'd be interesting. I am interested to find out if that really is the case, because that would be a great.
I don't think he'd ever admit that. But
well, that's true too.
I think that
he'll take it to his grave if that's.
I think that maybe they'd even write it for that. But I think with his performance, to actually lend his name to a movie that he was actually cursing, just a few years ago, actually 7 years ago, because it was the same year that Rise of Skywalker came out. That's why I think it's his apology. It's not necessarily he's saying I'm sorry, with those exact words. He's coming out and putting his name and his voice in a movie that he was just saying wasn't real cinema a couple years ago. I think because of all that, I think that's the apology that he was trying to convey.
Yeah. What about the only thing we haven't touched on so far in terms of narrative is maybe the settings themselves? We had the ice planet that felt like Hoth, but wasn't Hoth. We had a Delphi base, which we were familiar with. We got to go to Nal Hutta, which was probably the big one for me personally. We got to see Shikari, which, man, when they first did the first trailer for this thing, at least I was sitting here praying that this would be Nar Shaddaa. As a Legends fan, as someone who still plays Star Wars: The Old Republic and has spent a lot of time on Nar Shaddaa, I would have loved to see that. They didn't do that. Very curious that they wouldn't have done that. I don't know why they make some of those decisions. They don't ever really disclose that. But either way, and then we got Navarro, which was great, but we didn't really get to spend a lot of time there. I mean, we got to see kind of the flyby, and you got to look. We got to see like, wow, this thing is really expanded. It looks really nice, cleaned up, totally different from where we were in season 1 with Navarro. But we didn't really get to spend, that much time there. As far as each one of those locations too, like, that whole AT-AT symbol, a sequence at the very beginning, it's like a lot of that is just concept art from Ralph McQuarrie during The Empire Strikes Back brought to life on the big screen. Some of them were like shot for shot. Somebody, I can't remember who it was. Somebody posted, there's probably been a couple posts now on social media where they kind of took the two and put them over each other, right next to each other. And you can clearly see they were taking a lot of influence from those, all the concept art from The Empire Strikes Back. And then my only critique about Shikari, I guess I got Navarro, I've talked about Shikari. Only critique there is that sometimes it felt like it was too much like New York or felt too much like the Bronx. And what really pulled me away, I mean, it wasn't even anything until we got to like the monster breakout and that one caterpillar creature like jumped into what looked just like a subway car. It felt like it was on the rails himself. Like it looked like an old 50s subway car. That was the only time I was like, wait, it didn't feel like Star Wars. It felt more like Spider-Man or something. But I wouldn't say it pulled me out, but I certainly noticed it. But other than that, they could have used any number of these other cities. I did like the neon. I like it felt like a little bit of, Janix. It felt a little bit of Nar Shaddaa. It felt like a little bit of the underground of Coruscant. There's a lot of places that are like that now in Star Wars, but it was fine. Like I didn't really have a problem with it. We just didn't spend a lot of time there either. It felt like we spent the most time. Well, we did. The most time was spent on Nar Shaddaa, and I thought they did a great, or not Nar Shaddaa, Nal Hutta, and I thought they did a really good job with Nal Hutta and giving us a lot of different. Maybe not a lot of different, but it was certainly much more expansive, and we spent more time there than the other ones as well. But anything on the settings before we move on to just the last part, which is legacy.
Well, I threw up a comment here from Kyle Slagle. 1831. This is my exact thought. It looked like Chicago because it looked like the L. I mean, you would see the L like that, over the rails, over the street, and then you have cars going underneath. So that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of the L. And you take that and you throw a little bit of Tokyo in there. That's mainly the neighborhoods like Akihabara and Shibuya and Shinjuku. They all look like that. So I thought that's where the inspiration came from, is that overall the city itself was like a representation of Chicago, and then down in the streets it was like Tokyo. I enjoyed it. Again, I wasn't really big on the location. I know you yourself, and I know there are other fans that say, "Oh, that's Nar Shaddaa. It has to be Nar Shaddaa." It turned out to be something different, but for me, I thought that locale was great. And we'll talk about this later. But the music that accompanied that locale was amazing. But we'll talk about that later. But I thought all of the planets from Adelphi. Navarro, we didn't see too much of. We saw the Mandalorian's homestead, and we saw the city in the background as he was flying in. But I thought that was enough. And then, of course, was it Adelphi, now Hutta, the ice planet? All of it was all beautiful. It was all really well made. All those locales were great.
Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out, like, when they use subtitles or when they use titles like of the locations and when they don't. Like, it feels like we haven't really landed on anything consistent with Star Wars movies. I think the way I'm kind of reading this is, if it's said in the movie, then they don't show it, and it feels like it's kind of on or off. Like, even, they never said Navarro. I think he says we're going to go home or something like that, or get some rest, right? And maybe they just assume that, okay, we all know what Navarro is because we've watched the television series, but I don't know where they are with all that. And I'm not saying it was needed. I felt like, because it was narratively spoken where they were going, and it was very clear that they were going to go here or there outside of the opening scene, where it could have been anywhere. They didn't have to throw up, Wobani, as we saw like in Rogue One, or name of the Mustafar, as we saw in Rogue One, right? They weren't naming the planets or where they were going. So that feels more Star Wars, I guess, the traditional Star Wars, because they didn't use that, and it wasn't until Disney came in that we started seeing all that. As far as themes go, we've already talked about them, and this is the last piece on the last for your final review as far as the narrative goes. But we talked about legacy, whether that was Rod of the Hutt, Jabba. It was a lot of other legacies too, right? Mando and Grogu's legacy, the legacy of the Empire, and what the remnants of that were, and the repercussions of suddenly the vacuum that existed now that the Galactic Empire was gone. We got to see a lot of that. So thematically, that played throughout the movie in different parts and in different ways. There was a bit of Sins of the Father, which we've seen a lot of. That kind of coincides with the legacy portion of it. Paying for the sins of your father. Rado the Hutt, unfortunately, is paying for the sins of his father because the twins want his throne. And so they know they got to get him out of there. But I think the one that was really the most prominent and felt like they did a good job, I think they probably maybe could have done a better job, was just the whole, young taking care of the old, right? The old take care of the young take care of the older, take care of the young, vice versa, whatever. I thought they did a fine job with that. It wasn't so much in your face. It wasn't necessarily on the nose. We only had the one reference to it when after he's, comes up and he's, alive again, if you will, that he makes mention of that. But I think it was important for them to do that. Like, I don't criticize them for not, saying more or doing more with it, because I think what's going to happen is in future content, we'll see them coming back to that theme and see Grogu, right? So I just take that as, as a kind of a sign of things to come, rather than, hey, they didn't play the string hard enough for me. But what did you think, I guess, on any other themes that you want to touch on?
No, I thought that the themes were a legacy and then family.
Yeah,
I thought those played a big, and you could throw like, the Sins of the Father theme in there. All of that is rolled into family for me. But yes, it was definitely legacy from not just personal fronts, but from organizational fronts, and then family. It talked about, okay, I'm stuck with it, with a reputation that my family members have, and that affects me to, hey, I got to take care of a family member. It was all revolves around family. So I thought those are the two big themes of this movie.
Okay. Well, and so what was your final score, I guess, for narrative? And again, this is on a scale of 1 to 10. It's not going to factor into the overall score or final score at the very end. So just keep that in mind for anybody watching or listening.
Yeah, I had a couple, like I said, I had a couple of disappointments, but if I had to give it it was probably 8.5 out of 10 for narrative.
Okay. I was probably a little bit harsher on this. I went with a 7 out of 10. I think I've kind of explained a lot of the reasons as to why. But again, you got to remember in all of this for Chris and I, we're talking about Star Wars movies. Like if a choice was given between watching this and in another movie, regardless of what that movie is, because it's Star Wars, I'm going to watch it first. Right. So I'm at 7 to 10. And for all the reasons I gave, and maybe as we continue on with the further discussions of this on future episodes, I'll kind of expand upon that as we move on. So we don't need to spend a lot of time on this one, but let's move into direction. So direction is around the pacing, sequencing, styling, framing, etc. All of that. I felt like there was some really good moments from Jon Favreau. That first 25 minutes, like I said when we did our breakdown, was breathtaking. It was so adrenaline rushed, and it was everything that I felt like audiences needed to see in order to get reintroduced or refamiliarized with just how incredible of a character the Mandalorian is and how competent now, or maybe not, how competent the Grogu was. And they did a great job. Like for that first 25 minutes was amazing. I loved every bit of it. I love the exotic animal bar scene thing, right? That was going on. I said this when we did one of the breakdowns. I don't remember what it was, if it was actually the 25-minute thing or if it was in the trailers. I might've been during the trailers, but one of my all-time favorite movies is Hard Boiled, and that is by John Woo, Hong Kong film that came out like in 1992. But the opening scene of that movie is in this kind of same kind of bar where you've got parrots and cages. And if you've ever watched a John Woo movie, there's a lot of action, of course, over the top action sometimes. And there's he uses a lot of like stuff flying in the air to represent the chaos and blasters and or guns, at least with John Woo styles. It felt like it was an homage to that. I mean, it felt like it was a John Woo film during that sequence. It was very short, but again, it was just another way to kind of reestablish who the Mandalorian was, not so much to the audience at that point, but to all the other characters that were there. Like, okay, you can't really mess with this guy. And that's what brought the warlord out, because if he didn't, he knew he's probably going to he wasn't going to make it, right? He's going to get captured and taken or whatever. So I love that part. The Dejarik fight scene, that one was a little weird for me.
Yes.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I was the first kid to break out my Hasbro Kenner action figures and play with them and smash them and have these great grand battles all day long. And I get that's what Favreau and them were doing. I don't know about, it was more the choreography, I think, than anything else. Like, he didn't have a problem so much with the CG. That's a lot of work. And maybe maybe they could have spent more money and went over budget to do that, or increase the budget to spend on the CG. But I felt it was effective, and it definitely had its moments, right? Especially when, he raises the one up and throws it down, just like we saw in New Hope. So I get it. I mean, it was great in terms of that regard, but it was a little too chaotic for me at times. And I felt like the choreography was just weird. Like I don't know. It wasn't as fluid as I wanted it to be, but it moved so quickly, and it's there for a purpose. And I felt it served the purpose, which was to allow that chaos and allow Rada to escape, right? To say, look, I can't be a part of this. I'm not going back, kind of thing. That was the intent. It wasn't to show, look how amazing we can be with CGI and all this stuff. It was just a fun battle, and it was a reason for him to get away. I didn't see it pass anything more than that.
So for me, pacing was fine. The style and the framing, that was all done well. I did have some issues with the direction. You talked about the arena fight scene and the Jarek match. I thought that was kind of little all over the place. I thought that focus was placed on areas that probably didn't need to be placed, but could have been in other areas of that fight scene. There was that. And then the hallway scene, which in itself was great, but in my experience, when you're doing a hallway scene, and we could look at there's three examples that I have. We look at Vader's hallway scene, we look at Luke's hallway scene in season 2 of The Mandalorian. As he's coming, enemies are dispatched, right? And Mando several times went back and had to maybe he pulled one with his grappling thing and he hit his head. Well, he's still there, but he's still coming forward. So he has to pay attention to that, because if not, he's going to get shot, right? He did that several times. And what that happens is you have to split your focus on the guy that is coming up to him at the time, and then the guy that's like getting up after he knocks him down. And I don't think that's good direction. I think that what we saw in the Vader scene, what we saw in the Luke Skywalker hallway scene, that's how you should handle scenes like that is, hey, as they're coming, take everyone out. Don't leave anyone behind that could sneak up and, get up. Cause then the hero has to focus on that. And while it's cool for him for us to see, oh yeah, he knows he's there, he's taking care and he's going to flash back and take care of that enemy that he either wounded or knocked down or whatever, and then finally take him out. That's cool to think that he understands that he has that much experience to understand that. But from a visual perspective of me looking at it, I don't think that's good direction. I thought he should have just taken him out as he moved forward. I thought that would have served that scene a lot better. So that's actually a major detraction that I have in terms of direction. I'm in the minority too. I've talked to other friends about it, and they're like, yeah, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. But I'm in the minority there. And it's because I've seen shows like I know this isn't the greatest movie ever, but Batman versus Superman, the Batman scene where he goes to rescue Martha, that was perfectly done. I thought that's probably one of the best hero taking on number of villains at once. I thought that's probably the best that's ever been filmed.
I know. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I was like trying to think really hard about that, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I thought
it was one and done dispatching them. There was no
risk of him coming back. So, and Luke and Vader in their hallway scenes, it was the same thing. They were taking him out as they were moving forward. Yeah. So I thought that's how it should have been done. Again, that's a major detraction for me, and we'll get to the score when we get there. But that's one thing that I couldn't overlook. Even in the second viewing, it didn't sit well with me. So that's something I have to give some negative points to, unfortunately.
Yeah. I thought they did a really good job with too. And we've talked about this recently, or just the wipes.
Yes.
It's a characteristic of Star Wars. It's a telltale sign that you're in Star Wars. And sometimes, we get it with the television shows. Sometimes we don't. I think it's important for the movies to that feels like it's part of the fabric. It's part of the DNA, has to exist in some way. And I felt like they did a really good job. Like there was moments in there, like for me, it needs to be obvious, but not a distraction.
Correct.
Correct. I mean? And it felt like that was the case with this movie. Like I saw it and I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, perfect. I love the way they segue. I love the way they use it, the use of it. So very, very well versed in all of that. And I suppose that is coming just from Favreau's, he's been doing this for a while. He loves Star Wars. He knows what should be expected and what we're expecting to see. But I think a lot of it too is Dave Filoni in the background. But I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was one of the things, the wipes and whatnot. When Kathleen Kennedy came out and said, okay, moving forward, Star Wars projects are not going to utilize that anymore, along with the Wilhelm scream, which I could give or take that really. It's just a tradition, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's fun, but it's not like necessary.
It's necessary, but the wipes are essential in my opinion. When Kathleen Kennedy said that they were going to do away with that, I was actually pretty bummed. But I'm glad to see that now, we have other people in charge. And I'm not bashing Kathleen Kennedy. I actually think she did a real good job. Now that, Filoni and Brennan are in charge, they're like, yeah. And they love Star Wars. They grew up with Star Wars just like we did, and they understand those vital components. I was very happy to see those wipes, and they were timed perfectly. Not every scene had them, but the scene where the wipe would be effective, they had it in there, and I thought they did a great job with that. So I was happy to see that.
Yep. Paisley asked, have you guys seen it twice already? Yes, we have. I think we both have seen it and plan on seeing it, at least 2 more times that I'm aware of.
And I plan to see it one more time. And Paisley, you asked another question earlier. Did we see it? Did we both see it in IMAX? We did both see it in IMAX. Actually, both the viewings that I saw, they were both in IMAX, and they were. It was an amazing experience. I think this movie is made for IMAX. I'm actually kind of concerned because my next viewing is going to be probably a Dolby viewing, which is not IMAX, and I'm actually kind of concerned that it might actually lessen the experience for me. So, but it's going to be a good reference point. But yeah, I've seen it twice in IMAX, and it was amazing both times.
I saw one IMAX and one not, so I'll give you my perspective on the second one. That was not an IMAX showing here in just a few. Okay, how about let's get into our so from I guess for direction, where did you land on that one on a scale of 1 to 10?
That's going to be like a 5.5 out of 10.
Okay,
that one scene really did it for me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I was probably little bit harder on this one too. I came in at 6 to 10. Don't worry, it's going to get better from here on out, folks. Don't worry. But I came in around 6 to 10. But I knew that going in. Like if you've watched these shows and you've been watching our coverage of this, I've already said before that I've been kind of 50-50 at times with Jon Favreau and his directing. I've loved just about everything he's done, quite honestly. But if I'm looking at this through kind of an artistic lens and all that, or even a neutral lens, I can see where things aren't perfect and all that. And that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't make for a good experience, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. I'm being just trying to be honest with where I felt with it. So 6 out of 10 for me. Okay. On the direction. How about music? Let's get into music. Again, this is the composition and the use of the music. I got to say, man, like I don't understand the negativity around Ludwig. I've seen it out there.
The dude has an Oscar. The dude has an Oscar.
Here's my problem. It's not so much about the content that he did, but where have you been?
Right.
Like, did you not watch the 3 seasons of Star Wars of The Mandalorian? Because he was doing this from the very beginning. And I remember there was rightfully a discourse and a conversation to be had when that first season of The Mandalorian came out, because it was different. It was no longer Williams. There wasn't just strings and horns and very orchestrated music anymore. We had a lot of synth. We had a more modern sound to it. Back then I said it not too long ago, and I'll continue to say it. Star Wars has to evolve. And what we're seeing is the evolution of a lot of different things, music being one of them. And so what I would say is, I get it. If you're a purist and you're someone that just cannot move from that, and it's not even negotiable for you, then I get it. You probably have a problem with it and you don't like it. And you probably don't like a lot of other things about anything that's come out in the last 10 years. I'll say that. But in terms of like where this guy is coming from, he is doing some amazing pieces that complement what is going on screen. I know you brought it up. I don't want to steal your thunder, but that transition to Shikari was perfect.
Yes.
With the music and the way it just flowed really, really well. The only I got maybe 2 small critiques, and then they're not really critiques, but I feel like he's holding back. Like I feel like Ludwig is capable of doing much more with the music than he already is. I know that sounds weird, but here's what I mean. When you watch the movie and you're listening to the music, it works perfectly.
Right. Okay.
Like it's flawless in terms as far as I'm concerned. When you listen to the soundtrack just by itself without the movie beginning to end, that's where I felt like, okay, I'm fine with the main theme being repurposed and tweaked and stylized and all that. But it's heavy, like it's a lot. And I'm not saying Williams didn't do it either. John Williams would take a theme and he'd weave it into other things, or he'd give you a variation of it and that sort of thing. But it was more complex, I think, right? And that maybe that's not a fair comparison to say Ludwig should be doing what John Williams did, given everything I just said. But I felt like when I'm listening to the soundtrack, which is something I personally do a lot, I listen to a lot of soundtracks. I like for it to be very diverse. You know what I mean? Like it needs to be all feel connected, but I want it to be diverse in the way in the tracks. And I felt like it was just a rehash of that main theme over and over again in those tracks. Again, that's only when I'm listening to the soundtrack beginning to end, audio only. In the movie, it works perfectly. Right. I loved every bit of it. And I feel like, he's really, there's a lot more this guy can do. And I just can't wait to see him continue to do more here. And he's got some other, he's been doing work with other movies and other franchises that's just as good, that feels different. It feels fresh. I'm absolutely happy with the soundtrack in every way.
I mean, look, the Black Panther soundtrack, which he did, is amazing. He won an Oscar for the soundtrack for Sinners. I mean, he is amazing. I would love to see him in other Star Wars projects. I think he would knock it out the park. To your point, for me, when I listen to a soundtrack, I come from a generation where, you would listen to an album, song 1 to song 2, and then you discover the ones that you want to skip, and then you move forward. There you go. For me, when I listen to a soundtrack just like outside of the movie, it's always disjointed for me, especially when the pieces are the actual musical pieces are out of order. Like it's not how you would hear them in the movie. So for me, when I listen to soundtracks, I disconnect it from the movie and I'm like, okay, this is just what I'm listening to at this point. I enjoy it, blah, blah, blah. What's most important to me is how that sounds when you're watching it. And like you said, it was perfect. And for me, that makes the soundtrack perfect because that's what I want. I want the soundtrack to match the movie appropriately. And that's what it did. So again, this is the best category for this film for me anyway. And I'll just tell you it's a 10 out of 10. I think it's a 10 out of 10. This is the best category for this movie, from my opinion. And I thought Lugwood did a perfect job here. Yeah, he did repurpose the main Mandalorian theme a lot, but Williams did that too with the Force theme and everything else. That's part of Star Wars, in my opinion. So I don't have a lot of issue with that. Yeah, you do kind of, I don't want to say it gets old, but you do notice that it's reused a lot when you just listen to the soundtrack in itself. But again, that's not too important to me. What's important is how it sounds like in the movie, and in the movie, it knocked it out the park.
Yep, I agree. And my rating is based on the movie, not me listening, beginning to end. Like I mentioned, that wouldn't be fair. So where I landed on this one is a 9 out of 10. I don't know that anything is perfect. I mean, there are a couple things, Empire Strikes Back, and a couple other things, but I feel like John Williams has some 10s as far as I'm concerned, songs and maybe even soundtracks, but definitely up there in terms of some of the best work he's done. And it just fit the movie so well. I really enjoyed it. I think we're seeing the same thing here in the chat too, both from folks that are chiming in as well. So that's a 9 out of 10 for me on that one. Shikari is a huge hit. Like, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's starting to blow up on.
It's blowing up, exactly.
Memes and social media dances and God knows what else right now. So
I think it's in various social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, where you have that music available to throw over your videos and reels and stories and whatnot. It's top 3 already. So yeah, it's blowing up. It's definitely blowing up.
I've used it every chance I could. I mean, I've actually tried to not use it as much because I keep reusing it.
That's my favorite piece on the soundtrack. My second favorite is Rada's theme. That's like a banger. I think I'm going to throw that into my workout playlist because that's a real banger for something like that. So again, it's all good. Even the I joke about this, the bar mitzvah themed Mandalorian song, what they played at the end of the credits. I was like, I'm glad they didn't put it in the movie because that really didn't fit at all. But
that's Hugo's theme, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. It's different. It's definitely different. Yep. But I'm seeing that one catch fire too on social media. So I think the general populace is for the music that they're hearing. So, okay, let's move on to our next category, which was effects. And what we're talking about here is, whether it's special effects, practical effects, we'll include the audio effects. And then, as it warrants, we can talk about set designs or, the use or non-use of the volume versus on location for things. I didn't feel like we had a lot of on location in this movie. Like there were some of them, right? I'm not gonna say there weren't, but it felt like we just had a lot of, I would say, it felt like there was a lot of sets. They were great sets. Don't get me wrong. And great use of CG for the sets, but it didn't feel like we were on location as much as we were like in Andor or even like, if you go back to the original movies, like, Jedi, right, in the forest or on the sands of Tatooine, right? Right. It just didn't feel like that. But okay, so I guess why don't you kick us off on this one? How did you feel about special effects and practical effects? I want to definitely I want you to mention or talk about the puppetry work that we got, the stop motion work that we got. I mean, there was some really great stuff in here, and this was another one that was a high category for me personally. But go ahead.
So yeah, I thought the effects were actually pretty amazing. The one thing that I was kind of worried about, and I actually did notice, was the effects, the stop motion effects that were used for the 2 sentry droids that were guarding the entrance to the twins. I was like, okay, we've seen stop motion before, but we've evolved, and a lot of it looked great. If you go all the way back to like Jason and the Argonauts, that's amazing stop motion work. Phil Tippett does an amazing job with stop motion. The AT-ATs in Empire Strikes Back, amazing. But we're so used to CG now. I was like, okay, I know these 2 are stop motion. I'm going to try to be as open-minded as possible. And unfortunately, I could tell. Even though they were supposed to be kind of clumsy and whatnot, I could tell, and that was a distraction for me. And then it's like I was watching it with a buddy of mine, and he just whispered over, "He's like, that doesn't look too good." And I'm like, "It does." It's for me. It's not that it doesn't look good. It's just I can tell that it's stop motion and not real CG. So that was that was probably the only, when it comes to effects, that was probably the only detraction that I would have. Design, everything was designed beautifully, from, the hut, Now Hutta, the Hutt's palace, the interior of the palace, Delphi base, Shikari, everything, the salt bar, all of that was great. I thought all of that was, they did an excellent job. And then audio, I thought was great. I thought they had all the appropriate sounds there. I thought that the audio, how it was mixed really well. So I really don't have any complaint on any of those areas. Like I said, the one thing that I got that kind of just left a bad taste in my mouth was the 2 sentry droids being stop motion. I could tell, but even though I have to, critique appropriately, because that's what we're here to do, I am just absolutely happy that Phil Tippett had a hand in this, because Phil Tippett is part of the Star Wars lore, along with, Dennis Muren, John Dykstra, all the way back to the beginning. Ben Burt, he is one of those people, and I'm glad I'm actually ecstatic and very happy that he was part of a Star Wars project again. So no fault for that. It's just like I said, and it was overall, if everything was stop motion, those droids probably would have been fine. I probably wouldn't even noticed. But yeah, we're just so used to seeing CG now that, we could tell the practical effect. And sometimes it works. I think for me, practical effects probably should be limited to puppetry and, aliens and whatnot. I think for droids and ships and stuff, although they did use a couple of practical effects for a couple of Razor Crest flybys, and those looked fine, right?
Which they had done already in the TV series.
Exactly. So that's okay. But where we're talking about, things that have to be humanoid and kind of move, I think leave the puppetry to like the aliens, and if it's a machine or a droid, use CGI, because that's what looks the best. But if you give Phil Tippett a chance to do his thing, do it. I will just deal with it, because he deserves to be a part of Star Wars and a part of the movie industry for as long as he wants to.
Yeah. So I have maybe a slightly different take. I felt like the puppetry work for the first time kind of upstaged the special effects. So I felt like the practical effects for the first time upstaged the special effects. And that's not a bad thing for me. Like, actually, when I was watching this, I got a lot of Jim Henson vibes. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of like the Dark Crystal vibes. Mm-hmm. I got a lot of like OT vibes from Yoda and the puppetry work that was done there, the practical effects that were there. I don't mind stop motion. There's something enduring about it. I adore it in a lot of ways. It is very nostalgic, and it was a very brave choice, I think, to do it. Mm-hmm. When you think of stop motion, yes, we've come a long way. And if you think about where it started with like Jason and the Argonauts, and where we get to when we get to Empire Strikes Back,
right?
And Tauntaun, it's not that big of a jump. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of years that have transpired, and I think I've seen good stop motion done from like novice people that post on YouTube. I think there's a ceiling that you hit, with stop motion. You can't get any more fluid in some ways. The complexity of it all was such that I felt like it was a very, very good job for what they were trying to do. I get what you're saying though. Like, at moments you could tell this was stop motion. It like changed, right? Everything else had been fluid. Everything else had been CG or puppetry work that was within the moment and felt natural. This one felt a little weird at times, but I don't know. I liked it. I thought it was great. I loved the stop motion. I love that they went back to it for this. It feels nostalgic in that way. And maybe that's where I'm coming from, is just purely a nostalgic kind of a lens. I guess if I'm being completely open and honest about, is it something that I would expect in Star Wars in 2026? Probably not. But I liked it and I enjoyed it. And I thought they did a good job with what they did. The only thing about that scene was I was hoping that Grogu would be the one that was dismantling. I think they did enough to kind of show that he was changing how it was trying to fight, and it was making it attack other people or whatever. It was kind of losing its coordination. But I wish they would have just hit that harder, where he just kind of broke it up or destroyed it from the inside out, and not have Mando kind of be the one that did the final blow thing. But other than that, I thought it was fine. But yeah, going back to the puppetry work, the Anzellans, I mean, everything about the Anzellans was just perfect. Whether from them talking, their lines, the way they moved around, them coming off the ship. There was a scene in there at one point where they used the model kind of flyover that was reminiscent of the opening scene from A New Hope, right? We got to see that. I love the Anzellan work 100%. I thought it was great stuff. I loved Yoda. I love Grogu's motions too. That little clink, 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 clink in the back of the helmet. I mean, we'd seen that a million times already, but it still makes me laugh every time. The way he runs, the way he walks.
Yes.
We got to see a lot more of that we've never seen in the television series, which was awesome. But you can tell it's a freaking puppet, but you don't care.
Right.
You know what I
I
mean? It's already that the suspension of disbelief is just not there anymore with Grogu. And I'm okay with that. And so that says a lot about the craft, and it says a lot about what they were able to do with the character. So yeah, 100%. I loved every single part of that. As far as the other creature designs, we talked about Zeb already. The swamp creature, which was Gatory or whatever his name was, that was Stephen McKinley Henderson who played him. I didn't realize that was his voice. I went afterwards and typed in who was the swamp creature in The Mandalorian Grogu, and I found it. I was like, oh, it's that guy. I've only seen him, I think, in Dune, honestly. But I loved his work. It didn't turn out to be Yoda's master and all that. The other kind of
that was way off. Yeah.
Thank God that didn't happen. I wasn't a big fan of that one at all. But it just turned out to be just kind of like some swamp creature. I know Rob in the chat had said he wished that Matthew McConaughey had played that character. And I was like, oh, that would have been perfect. Yeah,
that would have been totally perfect. Yeah, it
would have been cool. But I liked Henderson's work. I'm not saying nothing against it. I think he was done well. I'll tell you what really, really got me excited in the absolute weirdest way. So some of my friends do a show called Star Wars in Character. If you've never heard Star Wars in Character podcast, just be careful because there's some foul language and it's a little racy at times, but they take these glup shitto characters. They do a whole show on them. And a man who is from Return of the Jedi was one of the Amanis that we saw here. So the Amanis, for anybody that's not aware, were the water creatures. They had the spears and they were going after Mando. They were searching for him on Nal Hutta. That's a throwaway character that showed up in the Return of the Jedi. He was in Jabba's palace. He's in the background for all of about a half a second in two scenes. And they made an action figure of him during Power of the Force. And I remember when that action figure came out, I thought that figure was disgusting looking. But what I thought was really cool about the action figure was that they gave him a spear or a staff. And on the staff were these heads. Now, granted, I was a young kid, right? So the idea that I had an action figure with these skulls on its thing, I thought it was really cool. You don't hear about this character forever. He doesn't show up anywhere.
Exactly.
And then suddenly we get to The Mandalorian Grogu, and here we go with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni playing with their action figures again. They give these guys a whole action sequence. I think they showed up in the Clone Wars, if I'm not mistaken, now that I say that. But at least on screen, we get to see the Amani, and we get to see a bunch of Amanamans fighting. And the way they made them more of a water creature, and the way they were lurking and circling, almost like sharks, predatory in that sense. They had the wooden staff or spear or sword or whatever it was. That was kind of a take on that staff that they had from the action figure. I just loved everything about it, and a lot of that was practical effects. It was puppetry work. It wasn't CG. You could tell. But I felt it worked really well. So I'm just excited as somebody who loved that, as one of the more definitive glup shittos that's out there. Love the fact that they had him in this movie. So great stuff there. But yeah, overall, I thought the special effect. Here's the only thing I will say about the sound. Sound effects were perfect. I mean, Skywalker sound, they've got a legacy themselves. They've got a standard. I felt like it met that standard. The only thing I would say, and maybe my verdict is still out on this, so it's not going to factor into my grade yet. It feels like in every big Star Wars movie, or just every Star Wars movie, how about that? There's always one sound that I walk away with and go, man, that sounded really cool. You know what I mean? Whether it was episode 4 and the lightsabers, turning on, or, fast forward to Clone Wars and we get the seismic charges, but there's always something that you walk away with.
Right.
You're like, man, that was a really cool sound effect. I don't know if I got that from this movie. And I'll keep my ear open a little bit more in the next viewings. And maybe somebody, if you've heard something that really stood out, let me know. The closest was, and I think it was Jason said it was the sound effects when we got to the dragon snake, right? That whole scene there, it was kind of in IMAX. I would say this, not in the regular not 2D, but the regular screen format didn't feel this way. But the overall audio experience of that scene was great. With the water.
Yep.
There was a moment when one of the Amanis went behind Mando, and I swear to God, I turned around and was like, whoa, that was cool, because you could hear it traveling. And that's not uncommon, but they just did a really good job with that. But that's more around the ambient sounds, I think, in the atmosphere more than a standout sound that becomes iconic and something we remember now from Star Wars. Again, not necessarily an ingredient, certainly doesn't factor into my overall score, but it did stand out that, I don't remember walking away thinking, ooh, that's a seismic charge sound. I'm going to be talking about that thing for a while, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
No,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I thought the sounds were done well. I don't think there was a legendary sound that came from it. Although I agree, the theater that I was in, it was actually a Dolby IMAX the first time I saw it. And like you, I heard everything around me, and it was just like that one scene, especially where they started circling around him. It was all around my head, and I was able to capture all of that. I thought that was great. Yeah, sound wise, I don't have anything. I thought they did an excellent job there.
All right. So what was your final score? I'll give you mine. My final score on effects, again, that's taken into account all the things that we've just talked about. Had effects at an 8 out of 10.
I would say mine would be an 8 out of 10 as well. Even though I had the detraction for the robot sentry, the droid sentry, the big droids that were defending the entry into where the twins were. Everything else was great. I thought everything else was the puppetry, the Anzellans and Grogu. I thought that was all done really well. So it did knock it down for me. It could have been higher if those were different, but no, I thought it was great. So yeah, 8 out of 10 for me. I think in that area.
Yep. All right. And then lastly, and this will be a quick one, but just the experience. So we're talking about the format, the venue, fun factor, etc. I got a chance to see it in IMAX. I felt like that was a way better experience from a just audio visual standpoint than the standard format. Oh boy, standard format was so cool. Don't get me wrong, it was great. Screen, maybe it was. I got to go see it again there at a different theater, because the theater that I went to was not the same theater I saw it for the IMAX viewing. And this theater has, for me personally, has notoriously been known to like turn the volume down, and I don't know why. I don't know if they've got older clientele there, or there's just a bunch of, I don't know, sensitive hearing people. I don't know what the case is, but the audio wasn't very loud, which was a huge distraction. When I can hear
definitely
somebody like whispering down the row over what's happening on screen, I'm like, no, turn it up. Like, it needs to be louder than that, right? So the audio didn't really work for me. As far as the non-IMAX format, wasn't too bad. Like, it definitely, you're missing some stuff. Like, you're missing like a fourth of the screen, right? In terms of like top and the bottom. But it wasn't a bad experience. And I don't think anybody's going to go, I don't think it does any harm for anybody to skip on IMAX. I think you're going to like the movie regardless. But I think your experience is going to be much more enjoyable, much more memorable going to the IMAX and seeing it in IMAX with the audio as well.
Definitely.
Just two other things. Again, that first night, I mentioned this, but the crowd was really into it. That made it an overall great experience for me. The second one was very, very quiet. There weren't a lot of people in the theater. It wasn't filled out anyways, but they just weren't very vocal. And they weren't like, I could hear some chuckles, but I mostly heard kids laughing than adults. You know what I mean? So maybe that's not a bad thing. And then just overall, like you talk about like the fun factor of it all, you know, it was a fun movie. And I started this show off by saying, I don't know where we went wrong in society, where somebody labels something as fun and that has some kind of negative connotation. It just blows my mind, because that's why we go to the movies. We go to the movies to have fun. We go to the movies to have an experience. And I had fun, and I felt like this was an experience, a Star Wars experience at that, in seeing it. So it felt like a Star Wars experience, for lack of better words. And I just felt like there was enough nostalgia, even if the characters weren't part of the Skywalker saga. Because you think about it, these characters have really no ties to the Skywalker saga. The closest we have is something that was forced into it with the, Grogu meeting up with Luke Skywalker. Beyond that, it has lived in its own ecosystem, its own bubble outside of the Skywalker saga. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But, you think about it from that perspective, this is the first movie, the first entry where we have 2 hours plus of Star Wars storytelling that has no ties to it, no lightsaber, as it was pointed out in the chat. And I felt like it stood on its own 2 feet. And so for that, I felt like it was a great experience. And I gave it an 8 out of 10 on that one.
So unfortunately for me, I'm gonna start with format. IMAX format, IMAX Dolby, the way to see it. Now, I'm going to see it later this week. And that's one of my concerns, that I'm going to be let down, that I'm going to see it in a non-IMAX format.
You're going to be spoiled. I'll tell you that at this point.
Yeah. And that's what I'm not looking forward to. Right. But for the format, IMAX was perfect. I saw it both times in IMAX. Perfect. The venue, both times, the theater was dead. And that's because I went at 10:15 both nights.
So dead is in terms of population, or dead both. Is in no? Okay, both. Okay.
Yeah, I would say the theater, the first night I went to see it, it was probably just under half full. And when I saw it the next night, it was about a third full, all spread out. And there was, the one thing that I kind of missed was, every time I saw a Star Wars movie on premiere night, there was always someone cheering for the Lucasfilm logo, someone, oohs and ahs and stuff. Really didn't have that in any of the viewings that I saw. So for the venue, as far as, or I should say the fun factor, it was pretty low for me. Although I enjoyed the movie, I laughed and I did a couple of woohoos and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but it just wasn't a typical Star Wars movie viewing for me both times. So I was left a little disappointed there. I think if I was going to rate this again, what carries this to where it's at is watching it in IMAX both times. That format, the theater itself was great. Sound was great in both theaters. Amazing. I enjoyed it. But because the crowd was basically dead, it's like a 6 out of 10 for me.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And that could change, right? This probably could go up for you if the next two viewings are amazing and you have a lot of audience participation, if you will.
Yes.
So, certainly malleable in that way.
Right.
Okay. All right. With all that said, why don't we get to our final scores, and then we'll jump into questions. And if people want to jump, you guys can go. You don't need to stick around too. We'll do the questions and we'll announce the winner at the end, but you don't have to stay on the show, if you will, to kind of win your poster. So just make sure you're clear on that. So I'll start. I'll give you kind of my final verdict. Again, this is taking everything into account that we just said, all the scores that we gave. Just to recap, I had a narrative as a 7 out of 10. I think the biggest takeaway, which I know I didn't explore too much, and I want to make sure that I do in some of the future episodes, I did feel like around the third act, things were like kind of came to, I said this in my initial review on social media. For me personally, it came to a grinding halt. The momentum and the inertia that had been built up in the first two acts just came to a stop in the third act. Now, I understand why, because that was the moment we got Grogu's growth. And I'm happy with the growth, but I still feel like they could have done the growth and not just ground that thing, just pulled the handbrake on it. And then I felt like I got whiplash getting thrown into the fourth act to kind of wrap things up and get out of here, because we're already at 2 hours and 12 minutes. That's my takeaway. So that's where I felt like on that. So I was a 7 out of 10. That also played in with the directions, which I gave a 6 out of 10. The music I had 9, effects I had an 8, and the experience I had an 8. So my overall verdict on this one is a 7 out of 10. I think that's where I'm at right now. I mean, I think maybe things could change, with more viewings, but that's a strong 7 out of 10. It's, again, like we're talking Star Wars movies. Most of these movies are movies that I would prefer seeing over anything else, first and foremost. So by no means is that a bad score. I'm pretty happy with it. Like I said, I had a great time both of my viewings. It was a lot of fun. I know, right? Taboo word, but it was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the story. It was great to see them on the big screen. But in the end, it felt, because it was a self-contained story and it didn't have a lot of lore building, and some of those expectations weren't met for me personally, I didn't feel like it needed to rise above that. That said, I'm excited about Starfighter. I love the fact that this was Star Wars back in the big theater. It got everybody, it made Star Wars relevant again. And right now, at least as of this recording, it is doing well in terms of the box office projections. I think they're projecting 102 million, I think.
Yeah, they're projecting 102 million domestic, and then between 165 and 175 million with international totals. So they actually is projecting higher.
So that's going to meet or exceed expectations.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that's good. That's good. That's actually good. Really good.
No, it's good. What's your verdict?
So my verdict, I give it, and I think this is because of what the soundtrack did to it for me, just a tad bit higher than yours, a 7.5 out of 10. It was a great return of Star Wars to the big screen. The movie was fun, and that's not a bad word. It did what it needed to do. I had a good time. I was entertained. Everything that I could detract from the movie was just a little Nerf pebble, as I said before. It wasn't anything to try to, drop it below 5 out of 10, but it wasn't earth shattering. And that's what I expected. But for me to give it that 8, that 9 out of 10, there had to be something extraordinary happen. And we didn't get with this movie, but it was good, great, had a great time. The one thing that I want to say is that what also helped me give it a higher rating than maybe a 6, because when I was rolling into it, probably halfway through the movie, I was like, yeah, this is probably a 6.5. I'm still having a good time, but it's above average. It's good. But it did hit on 2 of the points that I wanted to see out of the movie. One is the character growth of Grogu in his doing his own thing without the Mandalorian. Obviously, we have everything with him, trying to save him after he was poisoned. He did his thing, was able to get the antidote for the dragon snake poison. I thought that was great. The other thing is, I do think, okay, there's two other things. The other thing is, I think that while a lot of folks are saying, oh, they were upset because it didn't connect to the other areas of the Mandoverse, namely Ahsoka and the incoming threat, or the incoming threat of Grand Admiral Thrawn. I thought they did mention it, and they did kind of start building that bridge at the end when Mando was like, when Colonel Ward was answering Mando's question, why did you come for me? And she was like, we always come for our own. And he said, I'm an independent contractor. And she was like, sure you are. Sure you are. Mm-hmm. He's going to be part of whatever that is. I have no guarantee. There's no choice. He's going to be part. So I think that does connect to that. While it's around, it's not a direct connection to what's coming up, mainly through Ahsoka season 2. I do think how that wraps up, he's going to be involved. The other thing is, what I was expecting to see was the beginning of the end of Mando's story. And I also thought we got a little nudge to that too. With the fact that they emphasized several times that, like Grogu, Hutts live for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
I think eventually what's going to happen is Mando's story is going to end, and we're going to have Rada and Grogu.
Mm-hmm.
I think
I can see that. Yeah.
I think that's going to be what eventually will come to this, because and that just shows. And also there were other little aspects, like where he's like, hey, I have to take a break, after delivering coin to Ward. He's like, I'm taking a break. Little things like that show me that, I think we saw the very, very beginning of the end of Mando's story. So because it hit those things, that's why I was like, hey, this is what I was looking for. And 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. We'll talk more in a future episode about that too, because I have some theories as to where they go with this, and we'll talk a little bit about Rada the Hutts here in just a second. But so there we are, 7.5 from both of us. As far as our final scores, I definitely recommend this to anybody who hasn't seen it. I will continue to recommend to anyone who hasn't seen it. I don't know how you not love the television series, even if you didn't like season 3, you love season 1 and 2. I don't know how you not go see this, quite honestly. That blows my mind. So, all right. So let's get into the questions. We'll do this really quickly, and then we'll announce the winner here at the very end. So let me pull up the questions, and we'll start off with, let's see, who did I have first here? I have my Star Wars guy. He says, this is from Rob. He says, does anyone else think the swamp guy should have been voiced by Matthew McConaughey? So I think we talked about this one already. Great pick, but I love the actor that went with him at first. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
No, I thought it would have been awesome to hear him. Yes. But yeah, the actor that voiced him did a great job.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Julian DiPolo. And where did I have that one? I don't have it. Let me read it and I'll put it up on the screen here. But Julian DiPolo says, favorite scene in Mando and Grogu. And so I'll let you answer this one first.
So my favorite scene was the scene where they were actually flying into where Zeb drops Mando and Grogu and he flies into Shikari. I thought that was my favorite scene. The other scene that I enjoyed was the fight scene between Embo and Mando.
Okay. Okay, now this is going to sound absolutely weird, and now people are going to be like, okay, you need to explain yourself, but I'm not going to do it tonight. My favorite scene is actually that whole sequence with Grogu taking care of Mando. Like, I could have gotten 2 hours of that. Did I feel like it needed to be in this movie as long as it was? No. But was it still my favorite? Yes. And I know that sounds crazy, but I will explain it at a later time.
We will have an entire show to explain that.
Oh yeah. Well, the next show is going to be a character dissection on Mandalorian and Grogu. Like we didn't, that's, if you've been paying attention, we really didn't spend that much time on those two characters because we have a whole show that's going to be dedicated just to those two characters. So I'll explain more when we get to that, but and don't worry, Julian, I have you you were in the list when I did the random drawing. I just didn't have the screen up here for you. So you're good there. All right. So next one is going to be Jason Moe.
Yep.
Who's the Patreon.
And his question is, do you think any of the kinder, gentler Hutt personality we see from Rada can be attributed to the brief time he spent with Ahsoka and Anakin back in the day? Do you think any of the kinder, gentler Hutt person? Oh, that's the same question. So do we think his personality is because he spent time with Anakin and Ahsoka as they were rescuing him back in the Clone Wars movie? It could be. Although I think his mindset was he wanted to come out from Jabba's shadow. And I think with that mindset, he took different paths that led him to have a different personality. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm actually a firm believer that is the case. Like, there have been enough Star Wars stories, and they haven't been on screen. A lot of the stories where we see something like this has actually been in novels. Where you see a character who, at a very young age, is either been rescued or touched by the light in some way, and that sets them on the path. The Jedi talk about this again in the novels, but not necessarily on screen. But they talk about how every action that they take can have an impact like this, that you can potentially change the lives of other people and steer them in the direction of light just by very simple acts of kindness. And if I'm thinking about where did Rada go right, I think it started with that. They ignited the light. They showed him the light. And, and then beyond that, factors and their own personal experiences kind of change, but that always kind of acts as the guiding light for them, right? That little small touch with the light. So yes, short answer is yes, I believe that is the case. And we've seen other examples in novels and short stories where that has been the case as well. It's a great question there. All right, Steve, I'll read this one real quick. How much more of the further adventures of Rada and Zeb will we get? Where might we see them? Zeb feels like he's imminent. Like, I can see Zeb playing a role in whatever comes out from Dave Filoni next. Maybe not Ahsoka season 2. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe, because it depends on where that goes. Since they're coming here, he probably will show up. I would hope he shows up in season 2. But if he doesn't, I think in the larger scale of the battle or wherever this whole Filoni verse is going to go, if it goes anywhere, I think he's going to play a role in that. Rada the Hutt, I'm not so sure on. This gets into what we were talking about earlier. We're like, where do the characters go from here? I feel like at some point, if they really wanted to bring those two characters, we're going to get a big time jump. And in that time jump is where we'll get somebody like Rada the Hutt and Grogu more central in terms of like the number of characters that we have or whoever that entourage of characters is. So I think if we do, it'll be a fast forward. If we do get him in anything that's current, it feels like it's going to be kind of an ancillary role. I don't think he's going to be out there with, I think I theorized I wanted him to join Mando and Grogu as part of their team. And the entire time I'm watching this movie, I was thinking, come on, please, 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 please. It didn't happen, but that's not to say it can't happen. He's just got to get used to being part of the New Republic, find his way, figure out what he's going to do. And then maybe later down the road, there's an opportunity for those two to pair up. They stay together. The three of them stay together. Maybe he takes the mantle. I'm not saying he's going to be a Mandalorian, which I was thinking that's funny if he would have Beskar armor on, what that looked like. But he might be the one that takes over as that father figure kind of role from Grogu or from Din for Grogu. What do you think?
So I think we'll get more between the two because obviously there was a connection there, back when he said, hey, I like this kid, which from the trailers and everything, we all thought he was talking about Grogu, but no, he was actually talking about Rada. But I don't think we're going to see it on screen. I think if we get that stuff, it's going to be in novels and comics. I think we'll see them working together, but that relationship building aspect of it will be handled in those mediums and not necessarily television and film.
Okay. All right. You got the next question.
Sure. This is from Adam Young. Do you know, or do you think if we get Mando season 4, it will be a prequel or sequel to the events of the movie? He says, "May the force be with you. May the force be with you." I don't think it'll be a prequel. I think if we do get a Mandalorian season 4, it's going to be after the events of this movie.
Yeah, 100%. Like at some point, I'd like to know more about the prequel era of stuff, but usually, at least for Disney, that gets reserved or resigned to being like novels, like a book, right? Prologue to the story kind of thing. So we might see that, but I think it's going to come in the form of book. I think if there is a season 4, it is going to be rooted in all of the events that happen after, season 1, 2, 3, of course, and then certainly whatever comes up with Ahsoka season 2 and the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. So. Next question. So thank you, Adam. Utini, as one of our Patreon members, says, is this the most inconsequential piece of Star Wars TV movie that we've gotten in the Disney era? And I did bring that down. He did provide context. Here's the full question. He says, this sounds bad, and it's not meant to be. Is this the most inconsequential piece of Star Wars TV movie that we've gotten from the Disney era? Maybe inconsequential is not the best word, but the best word I can think of. And to be clear, I loved it, and I liked it for just the fun story aspect of it. Star Wars can be simple one-off stories, and I agree 100%. Like, right. Dante is one of our oldest Patreon members. He absolutely understands Star Wars. He gets it. He's been on the show many times on our Patreon shows, so I know exactly what he's saying. This isn't negative in any way, but I would agree. It probably is the most inconsequential because it is a standalone story. We didn't have any of the world building aspects of this. There might have been seeds of that. And they may be able to come back to and reference some of the things that happened here, but there wasn't anything that was massive. Again, it wasn't big lore. There weren't sweeping movements, big swaths of changes that are happening as a result of this movie. And that's okay. It was a standalone story. It was to get reunited with Mandalorian and Grogu, rekindle all the love that we had for those characters on the big screen. And at the end of the day, we have the only takeaways that we have are the fact that Grogu has developed, Mando has developed, and we now have Rod of the Hutt on the side of the New Republic. That's pretty exciting in of itself. Where that goes, to be determined. But what do you think?
No, I'm a TBD as well. Could this just be a standalone a story that's inconsequential to the rest of the story of the Mandoverse? Absolutely. But we don't know yet. There could be some things that are pulled out of this movie, which, I talked about some of them, the comments that Colonel Ward made, the fact that now we have Rada working for the New Republic, and that beginning connection between him and Zeb, and the character development and how far forward Din and Grogu has moved. Could that all be referenced again in future media where it actually brings the importance of this movie up a little bit? Absolutely, but we don't know yet. So if I was a betting person, I would say probably not. I say this is going to be kind of self-contained, but we never know.
All right. You got the next one. This is from Vader's Girl, aka Kat.
All right. And Kat says, do you feel Embo was the right bounty hunter to bring on for hire? Do you wish they would have used different bounty hunters from the Clone Wars to pull from? The only other one that I would have considered would have been Cad Bane. But obviously, at the events of this movie, he has met his demise. So I think Embo was probably going to be the one for them to push, especially since it's a Filoni-centric movie. And that character was created in a Filoni series, The Clone Wars. Could they have pulled Bosk or somebody else potentially? I think for me, I like the choice of Embo. I could another one have worked probably, but I think Embo was a good choice.
Yeah, there's not many, like you said, there's not many left. I mean, there are a lot of bounty hunters in the Clone Wars, don't be wrong. I'm trying to think. We had Bosk, we had Boba Fett. He was a kid though. We had Sugi. I don't know if you remember Sugi. Mm-hmm. Aura Singh, Cad Bane. Trying to know who else was in this, but there was the one that Obi-Wan fought for a while there. But yeah, I think it was just a matter. It was it was probably a numbers game, mm-hmm. Like you said, we've already had Cad Bane kind of be the bad in not only in the Clone Wars later down the road, but he comes back in what do you call it? He comes back in the Book of Boba Fett. But before that, He came back in the stupid animated series. I'm drawing a blank on right now. I don't know why.
Was it the Tales of the Underworld?
No. He was in Bad Batch. Good
Bad
Lord.
Batch. Yep.
Yeah, he was in Bad Batch as well. So, you know what I mean? Like, he's already been used quite a bit. Aura Singh's kind of popped up here and there. She was in Tales of the whatever just recently.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think it was just a number thing. And they hadn't really showcased him much. And he was kind of one of the cooler characters, in my opinion. Unfortunate we didn't get to see him ride on his helmet there down the slopes like we did in the Clone Wars.
Right.
But still cool to get him on there. So I think I think he was the right choice. And I love the way they portrayed him in this movie. All right. Next one is from Paisley Rosengren, who's with us. She was with us. She's probably asleep now. What are your and Chris's thoughts about the music and pacing for the film compared to the TV show? Oh, good. That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think this felt elevated in a lot of ways. You know, the music was great in there. I felt like it was consistent. Like, it felt like the music was really good and on cue throughout all three of the seasons, quite honestly. Say what you like about, you know, the way season 3 went narratively. I still felt like the music was great and it still was on point. And this felt like just an extension of that, but in a lot of ways, it felt like an elevation of that for all the reasons that we talked about earlier when we talked about the music. I think the best takeaway that I would say from all this is just the fact that we've got Ludwig still here. He's still going to be around and feels like he's going to be tied to this series, at least going forward. But to Chris's point, I'd love to see him expand, like get him on to everything else. But I know that guy's in super high demand right now for just about everything. So
right. No, I thought this was a step above the show. I thought the audio editing and the pacing with the soundtrack, based off listening to it outside of the movie and in the movie, I thought it was elevated. I thought the pieces were stronger than what we got in the TV show in certain areas. And I think that it's elevated, definitely.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Paisley. She's still awake.
She's still with us. Yeah.
All right. Go. You got Dale next.
Yeah. Dale Skywalker, a Patreon member. It's like, do you think Thrawn is back in the galaxy, or that rumors we were hinting at about his return by the time the Mandalorian and Grogu takes place? I want to see. Here's the thing. I'm not sure. Could this have happened before the events of Ahsoka? Yeah, because remember, that's what Hera was talking to the Council of the New Republic on, is that, hey, this is a threat that's coming and we need to answer this threat. So you think that would have trickled down to like the remote bases, like a Delphi base. So I'm not sure. I'm going to lean on no. I'm going to think that this probably happens either before that, like right before that, or maybe it's happening at the same time as Ahsoka season 1. Because you can't ignore a threat like Thrawn if you already know that it's at your doorstep. So that would be my answer. I'm really not sure.
I would say, well, let's think about it. So Thrawn comes back and the Republic has word of it. Ezra knows exactly what happened. They probably got debriefed. I would imagine Colonel Ward would be in the know or would get some kind of a memo if that happened right away. But is there anything does that change anything for them? No, I don't think it does. I think the mission is still the mission. The mission is to recapture all of these Imperial warlords that are still running around, right? But that's not to say that Leia and everybody else that's their mission. You know what I mean? They need to focus on that now. So I think that's probably the case. So for me, I like to think this is either happening around the same time or shortly after. But the fact that it does, and the fact that Thrawn is imminent or now has been returned to the galaxy, even if they're all aware of it, doesn't change the mission. In fact, it just accelerates it. It becomes more important now that they track down these warlords and snuff them out so that Thrawn can't start reestablishing his team and building his forces back up, right? This is just a continuing debilitating Thrawn and the Empire remnants by sending Mando out there for this. So there you go. Okay, let's see. Lucid Truth. So thank you, Dale. Lucid Truth from Patreon says, do we see another season or movie with these two that further sets up Rhoda as Grogu's future guardian? That's where I was going earlier. But yeah, I think maybe it's probably a movie. If they really want to have like the two pair up, I feel like it's got to be, it's probably in the future as a movie. I'm not saying it can't be a TV series. I just feel like we've got to get past there's got to be some time that lapses here. We've got to figure out, we've got to, unfortunately deal with Mando and Din and his demise or however he goes out. That has to happen before I think Rhoda steps in, but I feel like they were kind of setting this up as at some point those two are going to pair up in some capacity, whether they're a duo or not. But that's just a weird pairing. If you think about it, go back to Return of the Jedi, where we know we've got a Yoda species and we've got a Hutt species for the first time. To think that we would fast forward, some 40 years later, and the two are pairing up, and they're both good people, right? On the side of the light, is kind of mind blowing to think about it. But I love the creativity on that.
So yeah, I would think that we would probably see this in a movie, especially if it's the finale of the Mandalorian Din Djarin. I think that would be a cinematic experience. I think that's where fans would probably want to see that story be told. So I do think it would be a movie. Could it be a television series, maybe a season of the Mandalorian? Yeah, but for me, I would like to see that where it actually alters the course, the trajectory of these characters. I think that is better suited for the big screen.
All right. Great question. We'll have to see what happens.
Yep.
All right. I think you got One Up versus CPU next.
Yep. One Up versus CPU. Do you think the story of the movie felt like a season of the show in a movie format, or do you feel like it changed as the movie went along?
Ooh, dropping bombs. This is a controversial question.
Yeah. No, I felt like this was a movie. Yeah.
Okay.
I know, Albert, you had mentioned that there were times where you felt like it was slipping into the TV aspect of it. I didn't catch any of that on both viewings. I thought that it was totally a movie. I thought this was written for the big screen. I didn't have that feeling at all.
Okay. I said it and I'll say it again. I felt like it did. It crossed the line just briefly. I think when we do the character dissections and breakdowns, I'll expand upon this a little bit more. But yes, I do. So I get the criticism, but I think overall it still was a movie experience, and I stand by my score of 7 to 10 saying it's a great movie and you need to go see it. So did it change anything for me? No, not really. But okay. Thank you for that. One Up versus CPU. Lucid Truth, another Patreon member, says, do we see another season? Oh, I went the wrong way. Sorry. Jeremy Reese is next. Patreon member, do you feel like this movie was a reboot of or start? Do you feel like this is a reboot to the start of season 1? There's more context in this one. He says Mando was a no nonsense tough guy that had Grogu, but was basically on his own again, without the cast of his friends from the past 3.5 seasons. That's true. He was isolated in this movie in that regard. He used his rope, but I'm pretty sure he didn't even use his whistling birds. And so I think the way I think the spirit of this question is more about, do we feel like this is a reset for kind of thing versus, a continuation? I get it. There are things in here where it felt like it was a step back, and the isolationism being one of the more prominent things, because I absolutely understand that. That's what I mentioned at the very beginning. We didn't have, connections to not only people from the galaxy at large and the New Republic, but we didn't have very many connections to the Mandalorian universe, right? The first 3 seasons, there just weren't a lot of connections there. But no, I don't feel like it was necessarily a reboot, and I don't feel like it was a restart to like a season 1 kind of thing. Again, I think it was just the way the goal of this movie was to get a Star Wars movie out there, have people enjoy it, make Star Wars relevant again. And as we roll into the 50th anniversary, and especially with Starfighter coming out, while at the same time giving us a taste of what we've been missing for the last, however many years it's been since we had season 3 of The Mandalorian.
So yeah, I don't think it's a reboot of any kind. I think it's just priorities changing. And as you grow as an adult, your priorities change. And I think, he made a couple of mentions like, I don't work for warlords anymore. Those priorities has changed. So I think what we're seeing is a shift in his personality, his priorities. And I think that's what we get. And that's probably why he's a different character than he was during the TV show, because he was still very much part of the Covenant, bounty hunting for whoever will pay him. Now he's apart from the Covenant because, again, the armor said, hey, you got to go do your own thing with your son. Yeah. So I think it's appropriate that he behaves the way he does. So I don't think it's a reboot. I think it's just a change in his priorities and his personality.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of growth for this character still. I mean, a lot of things to contend with that came out of the first 3 seasons that we've not even touched in this movie.
Right.
So, all right, you got the next one from Cannon Thompson.
Cannon Thompson. All right. The question is, for The Mandalorian and Grogu, is at what point do you think Grogu will start to grow older? Will Disney ever let him grow older? That's a good question, and the answer is eventually they're going to have to, right? Unless he meets a demise, which we don't want, right? I don't know. I don't know when we're going to see that. Again, this species ages very slowly. If we look at Rada is probably around the same age, 40 or something, and he's still considered a kid.
Right.
So I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know.
I think if I had to draw a line, I would say that they're going to let him grow, but not to the likes of like Yoda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, to be clear, the only way we get there, at least in my lifetime, is if they do a big time jump, right? They fast forward 250 years. Let's just say that. I don't know. I'm making stuff up here, but let's say we go 250 years in the future. Then I think we get a Grogu who's speaking basic and is more competent, fluid. He's not, herky jerky, maybe more in control of the Force, full Beskar armor, has all the whistling birds instead of the gooey stuff that shoots out at the Womp Rat thing, the sewer rat. Like, I see him, they would have to do all that for him to mature. Is Disney going to do that now? No, they're not. And I only say that because right now, the baby Gugus, not Gaz, and the puppetry and the innocence of him,
it's all a hit.
They're cashing in, man, on this right now. So they are not going to touch that, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. At some point, they're gonna have to. I don't think it's going to happen in my lifetime, but it could be a proverbial, hey, that's growing thin and we need to jump the shark, if you will. And so let's just fast forward 250 years and let's bring Grogu back. And now you see a totally different dimension of him because he's more mature and you've got Rada the Hutt by his side. And he's now developed into something that was to be determined. I think that's the only way we're going to see. But right now he's a cash cow and they're going to keep riding that cash cow all the way to the bank. So
I agree.
No changes soon. Okay. One last question, and that is from Paul Fussetti. Says, do we finally get a Grogu, Yoda, Yaddle species answer? Or will that forever be a Lucas secret? The short answer, and I think this comes up a lot, almost every 3 or 4 years, just really depends on what content's coming out. The last time it came up was during Tales of the Jedi when we got the Yaddle story. I remember we were taking questions about that on the show. It wasn't that long ago. But the answer, again, in my lifetime, at least for foreseeable, I would say even 10, 20 years, they're not going to touch it.
Nope.
There are some things that are just too sacred, right? And I feel like unless Dave Filoni leaves and some of the old guard changes, you're not going to see that break. There's too much respect. There are covenants that have been established long ago by the maker himself. I think they're okay with changing wipes and sound and some of the other stuff, but there are things that are absolutely off limits and will be off limits until those folks change or leave. And this is definitely one of those. I mean, they just had an interview not too long ago, and I know you probably didn't see it, but there was an interview where they asked Jon Favreau this as part of the press junket that he's on right now. And he said the same thing. He's like, nope, we don't touch that. We cannot, we're not, when that comes up, they tell us very adamantly that is not something that's up for debate and negotiation. Mm-hmm. We're never going to know. So, and I like that. There's some mystique around it still.
Yeah. I agree with you. I don't think we're ever going to get that answer. And that's what I want.
I know I want it, but
no. I want to not know. I want to not know.
I kind of want to know, honestly.
Because that you're right. That's part of the lore. That's part of what George said. However, George has said, Lucasfilm has said, Kathleen Kennedy has said, Dave Filoni has said a million times, we will never see the original trilogy in its original form in the theater at all. Ever.
And guess what?
Next
year we're getting it.
Exactly. It's the 50th and all that stuff. But again, they said never. And
right. So what do we get first? Do we get the species reveal? Do we get Star Wars detours? Or do we get the holiday special released in 4K during the holiday season?
If I had my choice, I hope we get detours.
Yeah. I like detours. I thought it was funny.
I thought it was great. Yeah. And the thing is, it's all complete. They just have to put it out there.
Yeah. Just get out there. Yeah. Seth Green, if you're listening to the show.
Yes.
Make it happen, dude.
Make it happen, man.
All right. Well, those are the questions. Those are the questions. I know we went really long. Thank you guys so much for all the questions. Don't forget, you will have another poster to give out next week as well. Mm-hmm. So anything that you submit between now and the next show that we do on the Mandalorian and Grogu, that's a public show. We definitely will get it in there and get you entered for the drawing. So here's the poster again. And then on the back, I forgot to show it had the IMAX format on there. Yeah. Oh, and Chris has got it in the background there too.
I love it. I love it.
Okay. All right. And the moment everybody's been waiting for, which is the winner of this week's poster is, and I have the graphic right here, Cannon Thompson. Thank you so much. This is randomly chosen thanks to Google. But Cannon, your name came up. So thank you so much for your question, your patronage, your support. Congratulations to you. And thank you everybody for the questions. This is like my favorite part of this. And I know we went kind of quick on these because we were just over on time, but I love this stuff. And I love where you guys are coming from, some of the things you're thinking about, and hopefully we'll get to see more questions in future episodes. I think we have at least 4 more posters to give away. So we have at least 4 more, I'd say at least 4 more episodes or maybe more. Just depends on how much content we have. So stay tuned. Make sure if you're not already a subscriber to this channel, please subscribe. Please like this post so more people will see it. And if you got questions beyond that, beyond this, or you want them answered, you guys can DM us or email us at hello@cantinacast.com. Or even if you want to put them in the YouTube chat, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can throw the question down in there. We'll see it. We'll capture it and we'll carry it over into next week's show as well. So, Chris, I know we're over in time, but any final thoughts on The Mandalorian and Grogu before we get out of here?
Great movie. Go out and support this movie. If you choose to, see it several times because that's only going to help this movie. I've always said that this needs to be a success for Lucasfilm and Disney. So that way, not only will the executives have confidence in moving forward with Dave Filoni and Lin-Manuel Brennan, but if it's successful, it will also help the psyche of the Star Wars fans, so that we can try to whittle away this thought that a Star Wars movie has to be really in depth and really complex, and it can't just be fun. We need to do away with that. And I think if this movie turns out being successful, it might help that a little bit. So go out and support this movie. It's great. I plan to see it again multiple times. And just, I loved it. And I thought it was what we need at this point.
Yeah. And I don't put my final thoughts, I don't put a lot of weight into critic scores, although I say this, as technically a critic because of this show. That aside, I feel like the audience scores are more in line, generally speaking, with what, the experience is. If you look at the audience scores on this one, they're pretty high.
They're pretty high. Yep.
Which is great news. And I think for the average movie person, they're going to go into this movie and they're going to have a good time. So, tomorrow starts the beginning of the work week. If you've had a chance to see the movie and you loved it, pass it along. Let people know, hey, don't worry about the critics or don't worry about what, it's making money or losing money. Tell them what you had a good time. Tell them you had a good time. That they don't have to be an expert in Star Wars knowledge, that it is a standalone movie. And that was on purpose so that people would go and see this thing, So share it, pass it along. And I would say if you've already seen it and you didn't see the IMAX version,
yes,
you owe it to yourself to go see the IMAX version because it does elevate it. I know we've already talked about it. It's a dead horse at this point, but it is it's a much cooler experience seeing it IMAX with the video and the audio and just all the bells and whistles, just really good stuff. So that at least guarantees 2 versions, for 2 viewings that I think one of which is earned or certainly I think should be expected if you saw the regular format. So go see it out there, pass the word along, and we'll kind of leave it there. So, all right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Chris, before we get out of here, how about some shout outs to everybody that joined us in the live stream? I know there was a lot of folks that joined us.
There was a lot of folks. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. We have my Star Wars guys, Jason Moe, 3144, Jeremy Reese, N8YP, Paisley, One Up versus CPU 64, Daily Skywalker, Nikki Cole, Warhawk, 05, Kyle Slagle, 1831, Haruku Matsuki Ultraman 80, Vincent Lee 1995. I like Scream and Ice Cream. The only thing I can say is Gopher 3540, Dingus Den and Riley K 268 and War Horde W. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I don't know where some of those began and end, but that was go look at the names later down the road. But thank you guys for joining us. And
one more thing.
Credits.
Yeah. One more thing. Everyone, tomorrow have a fun and safe Memorial Day. And if you can, go catch the Mandalorian and Grogu.
Hey, yeah, that's a good plug as well. All right, guys, I'll roll credits, and we will see you all here on the next episode.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good fun stuff. But I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what. So that's your disclaimer.